The rain fell in Denver that September afternoon like a final judgment, cold and relentless. 3 figures stood at the graveside in the small cemetery on the eastern edge of the city where the prairie began its endless roll toward Kansas. The year was 1883, and the earth was dark with autumn mud. Eleanor Hayes stood closest to the fresh hole in the ground. She wore black, as was proper, though the dress was simple cotton rather than the elaborate mourning attire expected of a widow. Her hair was pinned severely beneath a small hat with no veil. At 26 years old, she looked both younger and older than her age. Younger in the smoothness of her face, older in the way she held herself like something already broken and badly mended. The priest recited words that meant nothing to her. His voice droned on about dust and resurrection, about the mercy of God and the hope of eternal rest. Eleanor did not bow her head. She did not weep. She simply stared at the plain wooden coffin that held the body of Thomas Hayes, the man she had called husband, for 2 years and 3 months. A third person attended this funeral, though he stood 20 yards distant near a cottonwood tree that had begun to shed its leaves. He was a man in his early 30s, well-dressed in a black suit and vest, with a face that suggested both intelligence and determination. He did not approach. He simply watched his eyes, never leaving Eleanor's face. The priest finished his prayer. The gravediggers, who had been waiting with barely concealed impatience, moved forward with their spades. Eleanor watched the first shovelful of dirt hit the coffin with a hollow thud that seemed to echo in her chest. Still, she did not cry. When the grave was half filled, she turned away. The man in the vest straightened from his position against the tree. Eleanor walked directly toward him, her boots making soft sounds in the wet grass. She stopped 3 feet away. The silence between them lasted perhaps 10 seconds. The rain continued to fall. In the distance, a train whistle pierced the gray afternoon. Eleanor spoke first. Her voice was low, controlled, empty of emotion. "I'm leaving tonight. Don't follow me." The man's expression did not change. He nodded once, a gesture that might have meant agreement or simply acknowledgement. Eleanor walked past him without another word down the muddy path toward the cemetery gates, leaving behind the grave and the rain, and the man who watched her go with eyes that calculated and remembered. 3 weeks later, Eleanor Hayes stepped off a train in Redemption, Arizona territory. The settlement was smaller than she had expected, though the advertisement in the Denver newspaper had been honest about that much. One main street of packed earth lined with perhaps a dozen wooden buildings in various states of completion, a general store, a boarding house. What might have been a saloon or might have been a meeting hall, everything looked temporary, as if the whole town might pack up and drift away with the next strong wind. The heat hit her like a physical blow after the train's relative coolness. It was late October, but the Arizona sun knew nothing of autumn. Eleanor carried a single carpetbag small enough to manage alone, heavy enough to make her shoulder ache. Everything she owned in the world fit inside it with room to spare. She had chosen Redemption for its name and for the small advertisement she had found in the back pages of the Rocky Mountain News. Teachers wanted. Experience preferred, but not required. No questions asked about past employment. Those last 7 words had decided her. The general store stood at the center of town, a solid structure of weathered wood with a covered porch and windows that actually had glass. Eleanor climbed the 3 steps and pushed open the door. A bell jangled overhead. The interior was dim after the brilliant sunlight. She blinked, letting her eyes adjust. Shelves lined the walls stocked with the necessities of frontier life. Sacks of flour and beans, bolts of cloth, tools and rope and lamp oil. And behind the counter stood a man in his mid-40s, solidly built with thinning hair and shrewd eyes. "Help you, ma'am." His voice was polite, but reserved the tone of a man who had learned not to trust strangers too quickly. "I'm looking for the town council," Eleanor said. "I understand there's a teaching position available." The man's eyebrows rose slightly. "You're the teacher. I'm a teacher. Whether I'm your teacher remains to be seen." A smile flickered at the corner of his mouth. "Fair enough. I'm William Cross. I'm on the council. The others meet here most evenings. You picked a good day. They'll be gathering in about an hour." Eleanor set down her bag. "Then I'll wait." She was examining a display of books, mostly Bibles and almanacs, when the door opened again. She did not turn immediately. She heard the footsteps first measured and confident, and then a voice speaking to William Cross. "Afternoon, William. I need 20 pounds of oats and some lamp oil." The voice was deep, roughened by wind and sun. Eleanor kept her eyes on the books, but every nerve in her body had gone alert. "Sure thing, Caleb. Give me a minute to measure it out." Eleanor turned slowly as if merely curious about the other customer. The man stood near the counter, his back partially to her, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing work clothes and a battered hat. Perhaps 35 years old, though the weathering of the territory made age hard to judge. As she watched, he removed his hat, revealing dark hair threaded with gray at the temples. Their eyes met for perhaps 3 seconds. Eleanor saw intelligence there and something else. A kind of contained watchfulness, the look of a man who noticed things and filed them away for later consideration. His eyes were an unusual pale gray, startling against sun-darkened skin. Caleb Morgan saw a woman alone, travel-worn, standing very still in a way that suggested either great calm or great control. Her eyes were dark brown, almost black, and they met his without flinching or invitation. Neither of them spoke. Caleb turned back to William, who was measuring oats into a cloth sack. Eleanor returned her attention to the books, though she no longer saw the titles. The moment passed. Caleb collected his supplies paid and left without another word. The bell jangled. Eleanor released a breath she had not realized she was holding. "That's Caleb Morgan," William said apropos of nothing. "Runs a ranch about 3 miles north. Good man. Keeps to himself mostly, but he's fair." Eleanor nodded but did not reply. She had not asked, and the information felt oddly weighted, as if William were telling her something important without quite saying it directly. The town council met in the back room of the general store, a space that smelled of tobacco and old wood. 3 people sat at a rough-hewn table when Eleanor entered. William Cross made 4. The woman was perhaps 50, lean and hard as jerky, with gray hair pulled back severely and eyes that missed nothing. She wore men's work clothes and sat with the confidence of someone accustomed to command. "Margaret Cole," she said without preamble. "I run cattle north of here. This is Reverend Samuel Ward." She gestured to an older man with kind eyes and weathered hands. "You've met William." Eleanor took the empty chair across from them. "Eleanor Hayes. You're here about the teaching position." It was not a question. Margaret leaned back, studying Eleanor with an intensity that would have been rude in more civilized company. "Where are your references? I have none to offer." The advertisement said experience preferred. "I taught for 3 years in Denver. Primary grades. Reading, writing, arithmetic, geography, history." "And why did you stop?" This from Reverend Ward, his voice gentle but genuinely curious. Eleanor had prepared for this question. "Personal circumstances changed. I needed to start elsewhere." "Circumstances." Margaret's tone made the word sound like an accusation. "We don't ask about the past, Mrs. Hayes, but we notice. You arrive alone with 1 bag, no references, no letters of introduction. That tells a story even if you don't speak it aloud." Eleanor met her gaze steadily. "I was told you don't ask questions about the past." "We don't ask," Margaret agreed. "But we're also not fools. This is a small community. We trust our children to you. We're trusting everything. So I'll ask you directly. Are you running from the law?" "No." "Running from a man?" Eleanor paused for half a second, then said, "Not anymore." The room was quiet. Reverend Ward shifted in his chair. William Cross watched Eleanor's face with something that might have been sympathy. Margaret leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Here's what I think, Mrs. Hayes. I think you're educated. I can hear it in how you speak. I think you've had some hard times. I can see it in how you hold yourself. And I think you're desperate enough to come to the middle of nowhere with no guarantees. Question is whether desperation makes you dangerous or just determined." Eleanor considered this. Then she made a decision, one that surprised even herself. "Give me 2 weeks," she said. "No pay. Let me teach your children for 2 weeks. If they don't learn, if their parents don't approve, I'll leave. No argument, no trouble." Margaret's eyebrows rose. "You're that confident." "No, but I'm that desperate. And desperation, Mrs. Cole, makes a person either very dangerous or very focused. I can promise you I'm the latter." A smile, brief and sharp, crossed Margaret's face. She looked at the two men. Reverend Ward nodded slightly. William shrugged, which seemed to mean assent. 2 weeks, Margaret said. We'll pay you $5 for the trial period because even desperate people need to eat. Room and board at the boarding house. School starts Monday. You'll have 12 students ages 6 to 16. The building's not much, just a one-room structure we use for meetings, but it has a stove and some benches. You'll need to bring your own materials or make do with what we have, which isn't much. Eleanor stood. Thank you. Don't thank us yet. These are frontier children, Mrs. Hayes. They're not soft and they're not patient. If you can't handle them, 2 weeks will feel like 2 years. Eleanor picked up her bag. I've handled worse. The boarding house was run by a widow named Mrs. Patterson, a woman of indeterminate age who asked no questions and expected payment in advance. Eleanor's room was small and spare. A narrow bed, a washstand, a single window that looked out onto the dusty street. She set her bag on the bed and stood for a long moment, simply breathing. The room was hot, despite the evening hour. She could hear voices from the saloon down the street, the occasional whinny of a horse, the endless whisper of wind across the prairie. Eleanor opened her bag and removed its contents methodically. 2 changes of clothes, a few undergarments, a bar of soap, a small leather pouch containing $17.30, everything she had left in the world. And at the very bottom, wrapped in a piece of soft cloth, a photograph. She unwrapped it slowly, as if it might shatter at rough handling. The image showed a young girl, perhaps 8 years old, wearing a white dress with lace at the collar. The girl's hair was long and dark. Her eyes were serious, staring directly at the camera with an expression that seemed far too solemn for a child. Eleanor sat on the edge of the bed, holding the photograph in both hands. Her lips moved, forming words without sound. Her hands trembled slightly, the only outward sign of whatever storm moved inside her. She sat that way for perhaps 5 minutes, perfectly still, except for the trembling in her hands. Then she wrapped the photograph carefully and placed it back at the bottom of her bag, beneath everything else, where it would not be seen by accident. That night, Eleanor did not sleep. She lay on the narrow bed and stared at the ceiling and thought about the choices that had brought her here, about Thomas Hayes and the grave in Denver and the man in the vest who had watched her with calculating eyes, about the advertisement that had promised no questions, about the name she had taken and the name she had left behind, and the terrible weight of both. The school building stood at the eastern edge of town, a simple wooden structure with 4 windows and a door that hung slightly crooked. Inside, rough benches served as desks. A blackboard, badly warped, leaned against the front wall. A pot-bellied stove crouched in one corner, cold and dusty. Eleanor arrived an hour before her first students. She swept the floor. She straightened the benches. She found chalk, mostly broken pieces, and arranged them on a small shelf beneath the blackboard. She wrote her name in careful letters, Mrs. Hayes. Then she stood back and looked at what she had written. The name felt like a costume, something put on for a performance, but it was the name on the papers she carried, and it would serve. The first student arrived at 7:30. A girl perhaps 8 years old with blonde braids and a serious expression. She stood in the doorway clutching a slate and stared at Eleanor. "Good morning," Eleanor said. "What's your name?" "Anna." The girl's voice was barely audible. "Anna Kirkland." Eleanor felt something catch in her chest at the name, but her expression did not change. "I'm Mrs. Hayes. Welcome, Anna. Choose any seat you like." By 8:00, 12 children had gathered, ranging from a small boy who looked barely 6 to a gangly youth who was probably 16 and clearly did not want to be there. They sat in suspicious silence, watching Eleanor with the wariness of young animals confronting something unfamiliar. Eleanor faced them from the front of the room. She did not smile. She did not offer false warmth. "My name is Mrs. Hayes," she said. "I'm going to be your teacher for the next 2 weeks. After that, your parents will decide if I stay longer. Some of you can read. Some of you cannot. Some of you want to be here. Some of you do not. None of that matters to me. What matters is this. While you are in this room, you will be respectful. You will try, and you will learn. If you can do those 3 things, we will get along. If you cannot, we will have problems. Does anyone have questions?" Silence. 12 pairs of eyes staring at her, assessing, judging. "Good. Then let's begin." The first day was a careful dance of assessment. Eleanor had each student read aloud those who could. She had them write their names, those who were able. She asked simple arithmetic questions and watched who answered quickly and who struggled. By noon, she had a sense of what she was working with. Among the students was a girl of perhaps 14 who sat in the back row and watched everything with sharp, intelligent eyes. Her name was Lily Cross Williams' daughter. She could read well, far better than most of the others. She solved arithmetic problems in her head. But what struck Eleanor most was the quality of the girl's attention. Lily did not just listen, she observed. During the lunch break, when the other children scattered to eat beneath the cottonwood trees outside, Lily remained in her seat, slowly eating bread and cheese while watching Eleanor prepare the afternoon lesson. Eleanor felt the weight of that gaze, but did not acknowledge it. She wrote words on the blackboard, her right hand moving in careful, practiced strokes. She had trained herself to write right-handed over the past 3 months, though it still felt awkward, unnatural. What she did not notice was the moment Lily's eyes narrowed slightly, her head tilting in consideration, as Eleanor reached across to erase part of the board with her left hand. The movement was natural, unconscious, the hand moving with far more grace and certainty than the right hand had shown while writing. Lily said nothing, but she filed the observation away, a piece of a puzzle she did not yet know she was assembling. The days fell into a pattern. Eleanor taught from morning until mid-afternoon. The children learned, some quickly, some slowly, but all of them learned. The ones who could read began to help the ones who could not. The older students grudgingly at first began to take pride in solving harder problems. Eleanor lived simply. She ate little, spoke less. She prepared lessons in her room at the boarding house. She walked to and from the school alone. She did not attend church on Sundays, which was noticed and commented upon, though no one confronted her directly. She was aware of being watched. The town was small enough that a newcomer, especially a woman alone, drew attention simply by existing. She felt eyes on her when she walked to the store for supplies. She heard the whispers that stopped when she came near. And she was aware of Caleb Morgan, though she saw him only occasionally. He would be in the store when she arrived, or riding past on some errand, or standing with a group of men outside the saloon. They never spoke again after that first brief moment. But twice she felt his eyes on her, that same measuring gaze, as if he were trying to solve an equation that did not quite balance. On the 10th day of her trial period, something happened that changed the careful equilibrium she had constructed. It was late afternoon. The students had left. Eleanor was alone in the schoolhouse, gathering her materials for the next day's lessons. The door was open to catch what little breeze moved in the October heat. She heard footsteps on the wooden porch but did not look up immediately. Parents sometimes came by after hours to discuss their children's progress. Mrs. Hayes, the voice was low, controlled, and sent ice down Eleanor's spine. She knew that voice. She had heard it last in a Denver cemetery in the rain. She turned slowly. The man in the vest stood in the doorway, backlit by the afternoon sun, so that his features were shadowed. But she knew him. Daniel Carver, 32 years old, educated, relentless. A man who did not forget and did not forgive. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Eleanor's mind raced through possibilities, calculations, consequences. Her face remained perfectly calm. "May I help you?" Her voice betrayed nothing. Daniel stepped inside, closing the door behind him. The small room suddenly felt very confined. "Hello, Anna." The name hung in the air between them like an accusation. Eleanor's expression did not change. "You have the wrong person. Do I—" Daniel moved closer, his eyes never leaving her face. "Anna Winters, formerly of Denver, wanted for questioning regarding the death of Thomas Hayes." "I answered all questions. The court cleared me." "The court." Daniel's smile was cold, but not the family. Eleanor set down the books she had been holding. Her hands were steady, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "I was told this matter was closed." "Some matters don't close, Mrs. Hayes, or should I say Miss Winters. Some debts remain unpaid. I owed your brother nothing. You owed him his life." The words fell like stones into still water. Eleanor felt them sink into her chest, heavy and cold. "If you've come to arrest me," she said quietly, "then do it. If you've come to threaten me, save your breath. I've lived with threats before." Daniel studied her for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document. "I'm not here to arrest you, not yet. I'm here to invite you to return to Denver. There's new evidence. A witness who heard you arguing with Thomas the night he died. The district attorney wants to reopen the case." "No." "It wasn't a request, Anna. It's a summons. You have 3 days to make arrangements. I'll be staying at the boarding house. If you attempt to run, I will find you. And next time, it won't be an invitation." He placed the document on one of the benches and turned to leave. At the door he paused. "You know what's interesting? The advertisement you answered. No questions about the past. Almost like it was designed to attract someone running from something. Makes a person wonder if someone wanted you to come here, if someone knew you'd need a place to hide." The door closed behind him. Eleanor stood in the empty schoolroom staring at the document on the bench. Her hands, which had been steady moments before, began to shake. Outside the window, hidden behind the corner of the building, Lily Cross had heard everything. That evening, Caleb Morgan sat on the porch of his ranch house, watching the sun sink toward the western horizon. The telegram in his hand had arrived that afternoon, delivered by a writer from the nearest telegraph office in Tucson. The message was brief. "Checking on woman late 20s, arrived your area recently. Maybe using name Hayes. Distinctive scar on left wrist. Reply if located. Marshall Henry, Blackwood, Denver." Caleb had known Henry for 15 years. They had worked together when Caleb was still wearing a badge. Henry was thorough, honest, and did not waste time on trivial matters. Caleb thought about the woman he had seen in William's store, Eleanor Hayes, with her careful composure and watchful eyes. He thought about the way she had looked at him, direct and unafraid, and about the fact that she had arrived in redemption with one bag and no past. He also thought about the advertisement he had convinced the town council to place in the Denver newspapers. No questions about the past. Those words had been his suggestion. Because Caleb Morgan knew something that no one else in redemption knew. He knew that sometimes the people who needed second chances most were the ones running from first chances that had gone terribly wrong. He folded the telegram and placed it in his pocket. Then he stood and walked inside, where he pulled out a box from beneath his bed. Inside were papers, old documents from his time as a marshal. He sorted through them until he found what he was looking for, a case file from 1882. A name, Thomas Hayes, an investigation into fraud and coercion. Multiple victims, all women. The case had been building evidence, accumulating, but before Caleb could make an arrest, he had resigned from the marshal service. Because one of those victims had been his sister Catherine, and Catherine had not survived to see justice done. Caleb stared at the file for a long time. Then he put it away and sat in the darkness thinking about Eleanor Hayes and the telegram and the weight of choices made and unmade. The next morning, Eleanor went to the schoolhouse as usual. Her face showed nothing of the storm inside her. The children arrived. The lessons proceeded. Everything appeared normal. But Lily Cross watched her teacher with new eyes. The girl had spent the evening thinking about what she had heard about the name Anna and the accusation and the terrible quiet in Mrs. Hayes' voice when she said, "I owed him nothing." During the morning break, Lily approached Eleanor at the blackboard. "Mrs. Hayes, may I ask you something?" Eleanor turned. "Of course." "Why do you write with your right hand but erase with your left?" The question hung in the air. Eleanor's expression did not change, but something flickered in her eyes there, and gone in an instant. "I'm not sure what you mean." "I've been watching. When you write, you use your right hand, but it looks uncomfortable, like you're concentrating very hard. But when you reach for something or erase the board, you always use your left hand. Naturally, like you don't have to think about it." Eleanor set down the chalk very carefully. "You're very observant, Lily. My mother used to say that noticing things was how you stayed safe." The girl's voice was quiet. She had to notice things, because if she didn't, she'd get hurt. Understanding passed between them, silent and complete. "Your mother was wise," Eleanor said. "She's dead now, 2 years ago. My father says she's at peace." Lily paused. "I think maybe she's just finally safe." Eleanor looked at this 14-year-old girl with her sharp eyes and careful words, and she saw something of herself, or perhaps something of the girl in the photograph hidden in her bag. "Lily, sometimes people have to change things about themselves to survive. That doesn't make them liars. It makes them smart." "But you didn't do what that man said, right? You didn't hurt anyone." Her voice wouldn't come. The question was so direct, so trusting, and she had no answer that was both honest and simple. "I didn't kill him," she said finally, "but I didn't save him either. And sometimes, Lily, that's just as heavy to carry." The girl studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded as if something had been decided. "I won't tell anyone what I heard." "Why not?" "Because everyone deserves a second chance, even people who made mistakes." After Lily returned to her seat, Eleanor stood at the front of the room and felt something crack inside the careful walls she had built. This child who had lost her mother and learned too young about survival was offering trust, and Eleanor did not know if she deserved it. That afternoon, after the students left, Eleanor locked the schoolhouse door and walked not toward the boarding house, but toward the creek that ran north of town. She needed to think, needed space away from watching eyes and careful questions. The creek was low. October having been dry, but there was still water moving over smooth stones. Cottonwood trees lined the banks, their leaves yellow and beginning to fall. Eleanor sat on a flat rock and stared at the water, trying to sort through the impossible choices ahead of her. She could run, take her few possessions, and disappear into the vast territory, become someone else again. But running was what had brought her here, and she was tired, so tired of running. She could go back to Denver, face whatever new evidence Daniel had found. Hope that the truth would be enough, though she knew from bitter experience that truth was often the weakest defense. Or she could stay, fight, risk everything on the slim chance that this small town, these people who barely knew her, might choose to believe her over the accusations of a dead man's family. She heard footsteps behind her but did not turn. She knew somehow who it would be. Caleb Morgan stopped a few feet away. He did not speak immediately. The creek filled the silence with its endless murmur. Finally, Eleanor said without looking at him, "Did you come to tell me you know I came to ask if you're all right?" "That's not an answer." "Neither was what you just said." Eleanor turned to face him. In the afternoon light, his pale gray eyes looked almost silver. His fingers worked the brim of his hat, restless, a gesture that seemed almost nervous, though his expression remained calm. "You're not from around here," he said. It was the opening she had expected. "Neither are you originally." A flicker of something surprise or respect crossed his face. "No, I'm from Kansas. Came out here 8 years ago. Running from something. Trying to find something. There's a difference." Eleanor stood brushing dust from her skirt. "Is there... It seems to me that running and searching often look the same from the outside." Caleb studied her for a moment. Then he said quietly, "What are you running from, Mrs. Hayes? The same thing you are Mr. Morgan, a past that won't let go." The words hung between them heavy with implications. Neither of them spoke aloud. "The man who came to town yesterday," Caleb said. "Daniel Carver. He's asking questions about you." "I know. He's the one doing the asking. He says he's a lawyer, says he's looking for someone connected to a case in Denver." Eleanor met his gaze directly. "And what do you think, Mr. Morgan? Do I look like someone connected to a case?" "I think," Caleb said slowly, "that everyone who comes to redemption is connected to something. That's why this place exists. It's where people come when everywhere else has failed them." "Is that what happened to you? Everywhere else failed you?" Something shifted in his expression, a shadow of old pain, something like that. They stood in silence for a moment, two people carrying weights they could not name, not yet, not to each other. "If you need help," Caleb said finally, "there are people here who would offer it." "Why?" "They don't know me." "Because that's what communities do, and because Margaret Cole was once where you are, running from something, needing a place that didn't ask questions." Eleanor turned away, looking at the water again. "I don't want help. I want to be left alone." "Those two things aren't the same." "Aren't they?" Caleb put his hat back on. "No, being left alone means cutting yourself off from everyone. That's not safety. That's just another kind of prison." He walked away, then leaving Eleanor by the creek with her thoughts and her fears and the terrible knowledge that he was right. 2 days later, on a Thursday afternoon, Eleanor stood in her small room at the boarding house and made a decision. She would not run. Not this time. If Daniel Carver wanted to drag her back to Denver, he would have to do it publicly in front of the whole town. She would not make it easy. She opened her bag and removed the photograph. The girl in the white dress stared back at her, solemn and trusting. "I'm sorry," Eleanor whispered to the image. "I'm so sorry I couldn't keep my promise. But I'm trying. I'm still trying." She wrapped the photograph carefully and placed it back in the bag. Then she went downstairs and walked to the general store. William Cross looked up when she entered. "Mrs. Hayes, can I help you with something? I need to send a telegram." He led her to the small desk in the corner where such business was conducted. Eleanor wrote quickly, her hand shaking only slightly. The message was addressed to Marshal Henry Blackwood in Denver. It read, "If you're looking for Anna Winters, she's in Redemption, Arizona territory. Come quickly. She's not planning to run." She handed the message to William along with the money to send it. "You're sure about this?" William asked, reading the words. "No, but I'm doing it anyway." That evening, as the sun set over Redemption in a blaze of orange and crimson, Daniel Carver stood at the window of his room in the boarding house and watched Eleanor Hayes walk past on the street below. He saw her enter the general store. He saw her leave 20 minutes later and return to the boarding house. He saw the way she held herself straight and controlled, as if she were carrying something too heavy to set down. From his jacket pocket he pulled a small photograph. It showed a man perhaps 30 years old, with a handsome face and easy smile. Thomas Hayes, his brother, dead now for 3 months. Daniel stared at the photograph and felt the familiar burn of grief and rage. His brother had been flawed, certainly, perhaps even cruel, but he had been family, and Anna Winters had let him die. In his other pocket was a telegram he had received that afternoon. It was from a private investigator he had hired in Denver. New information about the night Thomas died. A witness who had seen something. Details that painted a different picture than the one Anna had told. Daniel folded both the photograph and the telegram and put them away. 3 more days, he thought. 3 more days, and she would have to come back. And this time, the truth would come out. All of it. That same evening, Caleb Morgan sat at his kitchen table and read a letter that had arrived by post. It was from Marshal Henry Blackwood, and it contained information that changed everything. No death certificate had been filed for Thomas Hayes in Denver. The man had left the city in July alive, owing money to several people. His whereabouts after that were unknown, which meant Eleanor Hayes's story about being a widow was a lie. But it also meant something else. It meant she had left Denver before Thomas died, which meant she could not have killed him, unless Daniel Carver was lying about when Thomas died. Caleb folded the letter and stared at the lamp flame, thinking. He had learned long ago that the truth was rarely simple. People lied for many reasons. Some lied to hurt others, some lied to protect themselves, and some lied because the truth was too complicated to speak aloud. The question was which kind of liar Eleanor Hayes was. The next morning, Friday, Eleanor stood before her students and taught as if nothing had changed. She wrote words on the board. She helped the younger children sound out letters. She gave the older students problems to solve. But in the back of the room, Lily Cross watched her teacher and saw the tension in her shoulders, the way her hand trembled slightly when she reached for the chalk. At noon, when the children scattered for lunch, Lily remained behind. "Mrs. Hayes," Eleanor turned. "Yes, Lily. That man who came, the one in the vest, is he going to take you away?" Eleanor's words stuck behind her teeth. She had known this question would come. She had prepared no good answer. "I don't know," she said honestly. "Will you fight him?" "I'm going to try." Lily nodded slowly. Then she said in a voice that was far older than her 14 years, "My mother used to say that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stand still when everything in you wants to run." She said running just means they win. Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back hard. Your mother was very wise. She was also very scared, but she stood still anyway, until she couldn't anymore. "I'm sorry, Lily." "Don't be sorry, just don't run." The girl left, then leaving Eleanor alone in the schoolhouse with the dust motes dancing in the afternoon light and the terrible weight of a promise she was not sure she could keep. That evening, Daniel Carver made his move. He waited until the general store was full of people, the usual Friday evening gathering, when families came to town to buy supplies and visit. Margaret Cole was there, William Cross, Reverend Ward, a dozen others. Daniel entered and walked directly to the counter where William stood. "I need you all to hear something," Daniel said, his voice carrying across the room. Conversation stopped. Everyone turned to look. "I'm looking for a woman who may be living here under a false name. Anna Winters, late of Denver. She's wanted for questioning in the death of my brother Thomas Hayes." The silence was absolute. "I have reason to believe," Daniel continued, "that the woman calling herself Eleanor Hayes is actually Anna Winters, and I have a witness who saw her the night my brother died." Margaret Cole stepped forward. "That's a serious accusation, Mr. Carver." "It's not an accusation, it's a fact, and I can prove it." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a photograph. He held it up for everyone to see. The image showed a woman younger with longer hair, but the face was unmistakable. Anna Winters, Eleanor Hayes, the same person. At that moment, Eleanor entered the store. She had come to buy lamp oil. She froze in the doorway, seeing Daniel, seeing the photograph, seeing every eye in the room turn to her. The silence stretched like a wire pulled too tight. Finally, Margaret Cole spoke. "Mrs. Hayes, is what this man says true? Are you Anna Winters?" Eleanor looked at the faces staring at her. She saw judgment there, fear, curiosity. She saw Lily Cross standing near her father, eyes wide. She saw William troubled. She saw Reverend Ward sad. And standing near the back, she saw Caleb Morgan, his expression unreadable. Eleanor took a breath. Then she made a choice. "Yes, my real name is Anna Winters." The room erupted, people talking at once. Daniel stepped forward triumphant, but Eleanor raised her voice above the noise. "And I did not kill Thomas Hayes. I was his wife. I left him because he was cruel and controlling. I came here to start a new life, that's the truth." "That's a lie." Daniel's face flushed red. "You were there when he died. A neighbor heard you arguing." "Yes, we argued, and then I left. And when I heard he had died, I did not mourn, but I did not kill him. You let him die." The accusation hung in the air. Eleanor's hands clenched at her sides. "No," she said quietly, "I let myself live." In the silence that followed, a voice spoke from the back of the room. "I have something to say." Everyone turned. Caleb Morgan stepped forward, holding a piece of paper. "I received this today. It's from Marshal Henry Blackwood in Denver. According to his investigation, Thomas Hayes did not die in September, as Mr. Carver claims. There's no death certificate, no burial record. The last confirmed sighting of Thomas Hayes was in July alive and leaving Denver." Daniel's face went white. "That's impossible. Is it? Or did you lie about when your brother died to make it look like Mrs. Hayes, like Anna, was involved?" The room exploded again. Daniel lunged toward Caleb, shouting denials. William and another man grabbed him, held him back. In the chaos, Eleanor's eyes met Caleb's across the room. She saw something there she had not expected. Not judgment, not pity, but understanding, recognition. As if he knew exactly what it was to carry a secret that was both truth and lie, defense and admission. Margaret Cole's voice cut through the noise like a knife. "Enough! Everybody out, except the council and these two." The crowd dispersed slowly, reluctantly. When the room cleared, only Margaret, William, Reverend Ward, Eleanor, Daniel, and Caleb remained. Margaret turned to Daniel. "You lied about when your brother died." Daniel's voice broke. "I thought if I could make it seem recent, make it seem like she was there, I could force the truth out. He is dead. I got word last month. He died in Santa Fe in a boarding house alone. The landlady found him. It was his heart, they said. But I know she drove him to it. Her coldness, her refusal to love him." His voice cracked completely. "He loved her. My brother loved her. And she left him to die alone." Eleanor stared at this broken man and felt something shift inside her. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said quietly, "but I will not apologize for leaving a marriage that was destroying me. Your brother may have loved me in his way, but his love felt like drowning." Daniel sank into a chair, his face in his hands. Margaret looked at Eleanor. "Mrs. Hayes, Anna, whatever you want to be called, did you have anything to do with Thomas Hayes's death?" "No, I left him in July. I never saw him again." Do you have proof? Eleanor thought of the telegram she had sent. The one that would bring Marshal Blackwood here, the one that would expose every truth and every lie. Marshal Blackwood is coming, she said. I sent for him myself. He can verify everything. Margaret studied her for a long moment, then she nodded. All right, we wait for the marshal. Until then you keep teaching. And you, she turned to Daniel, you stay away from her. Understood. Daniel did not answer. He simply sat there, grief and rage warring on his face. The meeting ended. People filed out. Eleanor found herself alone on the porch of the general store, staring at the dark street. Footsteps behind her. She did not turn. You sent for the marshal yourself, Caleb said. It was not a question. Yes. Why? Eleanor finally looked at him. In the lamplight from the store window, his face was all shadows and angles. Because I'm tired of running. Because these children deserve a teacher who isn't hiding. Because... She stopped, struggling for words. Because maybe redemption is not about erasing the past. Maybe it's about finally facing it. Caleb moved to stand beside her, both of them looking out at the dark town. I knew who you were, he said quietly, from the moment you arrived. I was a U.S. Marshal in Denver. I investigated Thomas Hayes. I knew what he did to women. I knew your name. Eleanor's breath caught. You knew, and you said nothing. I said nothing because I understood. My sister, his voice roughened. Catherine. She was one of Thomas's victims. She killed herself because of what he did to her. So when you showed up here, I saw it. The same hurt, the same need to disappear. And I thought, maybe I could give you what no one gave her, a chance to start over. Eleanor turned to face him fully. So this whole town, the advertisement, it was all a trap. Caleb shook his head. No, an opportunity for you, for others, like you. For me too, if I'm honest. I needed to believe that second chances were possible, that people could be more than their worst moments. Tears ran down Eleanor's face. She did not try to hide them. I didn't kill him, she whispered. But I wanted to. There were moments when I hated him so much I wished him dead. Does that make me guilty? It makes you human. They stood in silence, two broken people on a dark street in a town named for the thing they both needed most. Finally, Eleanor said, The girl in the photograph. In my bag. Her name is Grace. She's my sister. She's 12 years old now, in an orphanage in Denver because I couldn't afford to keep her. Everything I've done, every lie I've told, every choice I've made, it's been to get her back, to earn enough money to bring her here, to give her a life that doesn't include men like Thomas Hayes. Caleb absorbed this. Then he said, When Marshal Blackwood comes, when the truth comes out, you might lose everything. The teaching job, your place here. I know. But you called him anyway, yes? Why? Eleanor looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Because I want Grace to know her sister. The real one, not the woman hiding behind a false name, not the person too scared to stand still. I want her to know that when the world tried to break me, I fought back. Even if I lose. Especially if I lose. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something that surprised them both. He reached out and took her hand, just held it warm and solid in the darkness. Then we'll fight together, he said. However this ends, you won't face it alone. And standing there under the vast Arizona sky, Eleanor felt something she had not felt in years. Not hope exactly, not yet. But perhaps the memory of hope. The possibility that maybe, just maybe, she had found the one thing she had been searching for all along. Not redemption in the form of forgiveness, but redemption in the form of finally being seen. And across the street, hidden in the shadows of the boarding house porch, Daniel Carver watched them and felt his certainty begin to crack. Because in that moment, seeing Anna Winter's tears and hearing the brokenness in her voice, he understood something terrible. His brother had not loved this woman. He had owned her, controlled her, broken her. And Daniel, in his grief and rage, had been trying to finish what Thomas started. The photograph of his brother felt heavy in his pocket. The telegram about new evidence felt like ash in his mouth. Because sometimes the worst lies are the ones we tell ourselves. And sometimes the truth we seek is not the one we want to find. The morning after the confrontation in the general store arrived with a stillness that felt like held breath. Eleanor woke before dawn in her small room at the boarding house, her body aching as if she had been running all night instead of lying motionless in bed staring at darkness. She had made her confession. Her real name was Anna Winters. The secret she had carried like a second skin for 3 months had been stripped away in front of half the town, and now she had to face the consequences. She dressed carefully, her hands steady despite the trembling that lived somewhere deeper in her bones. The blue cotton dress carefully mended, her hair pinned back with precision. If she was going to stand before her students today, she would do it looking like someone who had nothing to hide. The schoolhouse was empty when she arrived, as it always was at this hour. Eleanor swept the floor that did not need sweeping. She arranged the chalk that was already arranged. She wrote the day's lessons on the board in her careful, right-handed script, though her left hand ached with the desire to take over. She was erasing a mistake when she heard the door open behind her. Margaret Cole stood in the doorway, her weathered face unreadable in the early morning light. "Mrs. Hayes," she said. Then she paused. "Or should I call you something else now?" Eleanor set down the eraser. "Anna. My name is Anna Winters." Margaret stepped inside, closing the door behind her. For a long moment she simply looked at Eleanor, those sharp eyes taking in every detail. "Why did you lie?" The question was not accusatory. It was genuine curiosity, the kind that came from someone who had perhaps told her own necessary lies. "Because I needed to disappear," Eleanor said. And Eleanor Hayes was a name that meant nothing to anyone. Anna Winters carried too much weight. What kind of weight? Eleanor thought about the question, about all the things that name held. Shame and grief and a terrible choice made in 10 minutes that felt like a lifetime. The kind that drowns you if you try to carry it alone. Margaret nodded slowly as if this answer satisfied something. She walked to one of the benches and sat down, gesturing for Eleanor to do the same. "I came here 12 years ago," Margaret said. "My name wasn't Cole then, it was Brennan. I left a husband in Texas who thought his fists were a reasonable way to settle disagreements. I took my maiden name back, came to Arizona, and never looked back." Eleanor stared at her. "You never told anyone, didn't see the need. The past is past. What matters is what you do with the present." Margaret's eyes were steady. "But here's the thing, Anna. You can change your name. You can cross half the country. But you can't outrun what's inside you. The guilt, the fear, the anger, that follows. And sooner or later, you have to turn around and face it." "I know." "Do you?" "Because it seems to me you've been running pretty hard. And now that you've stopped, now that everyone knows your real name, you're going to have to decide what that name means. Is it the name of a victim? A survivor? A woman who made hard choices? You get to decide that. Not Daniel Carver. Not Thomas Hayes's ghost. You." The words settled into Eleanor's chest, heavy and true. "What if I don't know how to decide that?" "Then you start by showing up. You teach those children today. You answer their questions honestly. You stop hiding and start living. That's how you figure out who Anna Winters really is." Margaret stood brushed dust from her trousers. At the door she paused. "The council is meeting tonight, 7 o'clock. We need to discuss what happens next. With you, with the school, with Daniel Carver, you should be there." "Will they let me stay?" "That depends on what you say when they ask you the hard questions. And Anna, they're going to ask." After Margaret left, Eleanor sat alone in the quiet schoolhouse and thought about names and identities and the exhausting work of being seen. She had spent 3 months building Eleanor Hayes, the calm teacher with no past. Now that construction was demolished. Anna Winters stood in the rubble, uncertain and exposed, but alive, still alive. The students arrived as they always did, a scatter of children ranging from small to nearly grown. But today there was a difference. They whispered among themselves. They stared at Eleanor with new eyes. News traveled fast in a town this small. Lily Cross was the last to enter. She took her usual seat in the back row and met Eleanor's gaze directly. There was no judgment in the girl's eyes. Only a question, what now? Eleanor stood at the front of the room and waited for silence. It came slowly, reluctantly, thick with curiosity and unasked questions. "Some of you have heard that my real name is not Eleanor Hayes," she began. Her voice was steady. "That's true. My real name is Anna Winters. I came here 3 months ago using a different name because I was running from a difficult situation. I'm not going to share all the details with you, some things are private. But I want you to know that I never lied about the things that matter. I'm still a teacher, I still believe in education, and I still believe that every one of you can learn and grow and become someone remarkable." A small hand went up. Anna Kirkland, the 8-year-old with serious eyes. "Yes, Anna. Are you in trouble?" Eleanor considered the question. "I don't know yet. Maybe." "Did you do something bad?" "I survived something bad. Whether that's the same thing, I'm not sure." Another hand. Thomas, the boy who loved mathematics. "Are you going to leave?" The question pierced her. Eleanor looked at their faces, these children who had begun to trust her to open up, to believe that learning mattered. "I hope not," she said honestly, "but I can't promise. Sometimes adults have to face consequences for their choices, even when those choices were the only ones they could make." Lily's voice came from the back. "My mother used to say that brave people aren't the ones who never get scared. They're the ones who get scared and do the hard thing anyway." Eleanor's couldn't speak past the pressure in her chest. "Your mother was very wise. She also said that everyone deserves to be called by their real name, because a name is a kind of truth, and truth is important even when it hurts." The room was silent. Eleanor looked at this 14-year-old girl who seemed to understand more about courage than most adults ever learned. Then from now on, Eleanor said, "You can call me Miss Winters if you prefer. I answer to both names because they're both true. They're both me." The day proceeded. Lessons happened. Children learned. And slowly the strangeness faded into something like normal. By afternoon, several of the younger students were calling her Miss Winters, without hesitation, as if it had always been her name. But Eleanor noticed other things too. The way 2 of the older boys whispered and glanced at her. The way one parent, picking up her daughter early, gave Eleanor a long, measuring look that held no warmth. Not everyone would be as understanding as Margaret Cole. Not everyone would accept that complicated truth was still truth. That evening, as twilight painted the desert in shades of amber and purple, Caleb Morgan sat on his porch and tried to make sense of his own tangled thoughts. He had revealed his secret last night, his connection to Thomas Hayes, his knowledge of Anna's real identity. He had laid bare the fact that he had known who she was from the beginning, that he had orchestrated her arrival in redemption as surely as if he had sent her a personal invitation. And now he had to live with what that revelation meant. The telegram from Marshall Blackwood sat on the table beside him, its words etched into his memory. Henry would arrive in 3 days. He would investigate. He would ask questions that Caleb was not sure he wanted to answer. Because the truth about Catherine was more complicated than he had let on. His sister had not simply been a victim of Thomas Hayes' manipulation. She had loved him, truly loved him, in the desperate way of someone who mistakes control for devotion. When she discovered that Thomas had lied to her, that he had never intended to marry her, that she was just one of several women he was courting. For their modest inheritances, Catherine had not been able to bear it. She had taken laudanum on a Tuesday evening in March 5 years ago. By the time Caleb found her, it was too late, and Caleb had blamed Thomas, had hunted him with the cold determination of a man who had nothing left to lose, had built a case, gathered evidence, prepared to destroy him completely. But then Thomas had disappeared from Denver, and Caleb's hunt had stalled. And in the emptiness that followed, Caleb had resigned from the Marshal Service and come to Arizona to build something instead of destroying. Now Anna Winters had brought it all back. Thomas Hayes' ghost risen from whatever grave he had fallen into in Santa Fe. And Caleb found himself caught between duty and something that felt dangerously like affection. He had told Anna they would fight together. But what if fighting meant revealing everything? What if the truth about Catherine exposed his own culpability? He had been a marshal. He should have arrested Thomas years earlier when the first complaints came in. But he had waited, hoping to build a stronger case, hoping to make the punishment fit the crime. And in that waiting, Catherine had died. Footsteps on the path pulled him from his thoughts. A figure approached through the gathering dusk. Caleb stood, hand instinctively moving toward the place where he used to wear his sidearm, but it was only Lily Cross, her young face serious in the fading light. "Mr. Morgan? May I speak with you?" Caleb relaxed slightly. "Of course. What brings you out here?" Lily climbed the porch steps and stood before him, clutching something in her hands, a piece of paper old and worn. "I found something," she said, "in my father's records at the store. He keeps copies of old newspapers, advertisements, things like that for his files." She held out the paper. Caleb took it, though something in her expression warned him he would not like what he found. It was a newspaper clipping from the Rocky Mountain News dated June 1883. A small notice in the back pages, the kind easily missed unless you were looking for it. U.S. Marshal Caleb Morgan resigned his position this week after 8 years of service. Marshal Morgan cited personal reasons for his departure. He was known for his thorough investigations and unwavering commitment to justice. Below that, in a different section dated 2 weeks earlier, another small notice. Miss Catherine Morgan, age 28, was laid to rest Tuesday following her untimely death. She is survived by her brother, U.S. Marshal Caleb Morgan. Lily's voice was quiet. "You were a marshal in Denver. At the same time Miss Winters was there. At the same time Thomas Hayes was there." Caleb handed back the paper. His face felt carved from stone. "Yes." "Did you know her before she came here?" "Not personally. But I knew of her. I knew what Thomas Hayes had done to her." "And you brought her here anyway?" "You made the town put that advertisement in the Denver papers." "I suggested it. The town council voted on it." Lily studied him with those two old eyes. "Why?" The question hung in the cooling air. Caleb thought about all the possible answers, about Catherine and guilt and the desperate need to believe that second chances existed, about seeing Anna Winter's name in a case file and recognizing a kindred spirit, another person destroyed by Thomas Hayes's casual cruelty. "Because I wanted to save someone," he said finally. "I couldn't save my sister, but maybe I could save someone else who was drowning in the same water." "That's not fair to Miss Winters." "No, it isn't." "Did you tell her that you brought her here on purpose?" "I told her I knew who she was. I didn't tell her I'd been watching for her name, that I'd hoped she would see that advertisement and come." Lily absorbed this. Then she said something that cut deeper than any accusation. "My mother used to say that you can't save people. They have to save themselves. All you can do is give them space to breathe while they figure out how." Caleb sat down heavily. "Your mother was right." "I know, she usually was." Lily paused. "Are you going to tell Miss Winters the whole truth?" "I don't know." "You should. Because right now everyone's asking her to be honest, to face her past, but you're still hiding yours, and that's not fair either." The girl turned to leave, then stopped. "Mr. Morgan, I don't think you're a bad person. I think you're just sad. And sad people sometimes do things that make sense to them but hurt other people anyway. Miss Winters taught me that, about understanding the difference between bad intentions and bad choices." She walked away into the darkness, leaving Caleb alone with the weight of her words. Inside the schoolhouse that same evening, Eleanor sat at her desk and tried to prepare for the council meeting, but her mind kept drifting to the past, to memories she had worked so hard to bury. She thought about the first time she met Thomas Hayes. It was January of 1881. She had been teaching at Miss Porter's Academy for Young Ladies in Denver for 2 years. The work was satisfying, but the pay was minimal. She lived in a boarding house with 3 other teachers, sharing a room to save money, because every penny she saved went to Grace. Their mother had died when Grace was 4 years old. Their father, a clerk with drinking problems and debts that multiplied like rabbits, had tried to manage 2 daughters alone. He had failed spectacularly. By the time Anna was 22 and Grace was 6, their father was deeper in debt than ever and growing desperate. That was when Thomas Hayes appeared. He was handsome, well-dressed, seemingly prosperous. He came to the boarding house looking for Anna, specifically sent by her father with a proposal. Thomas would forgive her father's debts, all of them, thousands of dollars. In exchange, Anna would marry him. Anna had refused at first, but then her father came to her, reeking of whiskey and desperation, and told her the truth. The men he owed money to were not patient creditors. They were dangerous. And if he could not pay, they would take it out on Grace. Anna remembered the moment she agreed, the way Thomas's smile had widened, the way her father had wept with relief, the way her own heart had turned to ice in her chest. They married 3 weeks later in a cold ceremony with no guests, and that was when Anna learned the truth. Thomas had lied. He had no intention of forgiving the debts. The wedding had been about possession, not rescue. He wanted a wife, preferably one educated enough to be presentable, but desperate enough to be controllable. Anna fit perfectly. When she confronted him, he laughed. "Your father's debts are his problem, Anna. You're my wife now, that's all that matters." She learned other things too. Thomas was not wealthy. He was a con man, charming and handsome and utterly without conscience. He courted women, promised them futures, and then took whatever small inheritances or savings they possessed. Sometimes he actually married them. Sometimes he just disappeared. Anna was wife number 3. The other 2 had gotten wise and left. Anna was trapped by the fiction that leaving would doom Grace. For 2 years she endured. Thomas was not physically violent, at least not often, but he was cruel in other ways. He belittled her intelligence. He controlled every penny she earned. He isolated her from friends. He made her feel small and worthless and utterly alone. And through it all, Grace remained in their father's care, a constant threat held over Anna's head. Then in July of 1883, their father died. Not violently, as Anna had always feared, but quietly in his sleep, his heart simply giving out after years of abuse. And with his death, the leverage disappeared. Anna went to Grace, who was now 12, and living in a squalid apartment with a neighbor who had taken her in out of pity. She promised her sister that she would come back for her, that she would find a way to earn enough money to support them both. But first she had to leave Thomas. The night she told him Thomas had been drinking, they argued in the small house he rented on the edge of Denver. He shouted that she was his property, that she could not leave, that he would find her no matter where she went. Anna had stood her ground. "I'm leaving, tonight. You can't stop me." Thomas had lunged at her, then grabbing her wrist. There was a table between them set with dishes from dinner. As he pulled, Anna's arm swept across the table. A glass shattered. She still remembered the sound of it breaking, the way the lamplight caught the shards, the sharp pain as a piece cut her wrist, opening a line of red. Thomas had let go, startled by the blood, and Anna had run. She left with nothing but the clothes on her back and $30 she had hidden in her shoe. She went to Grace, told her to wait, promised she would send for her as soon as she could. Then she disappeared into the vast territory beyond Denver, becoming Eleanor Hayes, widow, teacher, ghost. She learned later through a carefully worded telegram to a former colleague that Thomas had left Denver shortly after. No one knew where he had gone. Anna had allowed herself to hope he would simply vanish into whatever new con he was running. Then, 3 months ago, another telegram. Thomas Hayes had been found dead in a boarding house in Santa Fe. Heart failure. No suspicious circumstances. And Anna had felt nothing. No grief, no relief. Just a hollow emptiness where emotion should have been. Until Daniel Carver appeared, dragging Thomas's ghost back into her carefully constructed new life. A knock on the schoolhouse door startled her from memory. Eleanor looked up to find Caleb standing in the doorway, hat in hand. "May I come in?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. Caleb entered, closing the door behind him. He did not sit. He stood before her desk, his hands tight on the hat brim, knuckles pale she was beginning to recognize. "I need to tell you something," he said. "Before the council meeting, before the marshal arrives. You deserve to know the whole truth." Eleanor braced herself. "All right. When I said I knew who you were, that was true. But I didn't tell you how I knew, or why I cared." He told her then. About Catherine, his sister, brilliant and sensitive and desperate for love. About Thomas Hayes and his promises. About the engagement that was never real, the money that disappeared, the laudanum bottle, found empty beside Catherine's bed. "I was a marshal," Caleb said, his voice rough. "I should have arrested him. I had enough evidence, but I wanted to build a stronger case. I wanted to make sure he paid for everything he'd done, not just to Catherine, but to all the women he'd hurt. So I waited. I gathered more evidence. I built my case carefully." He paused, his jaw tight. "And while I was building that case, my sister died." Eleanor's breath caught. "After the funeral, I resigned. I couldn't be a lawman anymore. Couldn't trust myself to care about justice when I only wanted revenge. So I came here, built a ranch, tried to build a life that wasn't about hunting Thomas Hayes." "But you never stopped looking for him." "No, I kept track, through old contacts, through newspapers. And when I heard about a woman named Anna Winters who had left Thomas, who was alive when Catherine was dead, He stopped, struggling with the words. "I wanted to know how you survived when she didn't. So you brought me here." I suggested the advertisement, worded it in a way that might catch your eye if you were looking for a place to disappear. I didn't force you to come, but I influenced the odds. Eleanor stood slowly, her hands flat on the desk. "You used me." "Yes. To what ease your guilt proved that someone could escape Thomas Hayes alive?" "Both?" "Neither." "I don't know." Caleb's voice broke slightly. "I thought if I could give you a chance, if I could help you build a new life, maybe it would mean Catherine's death wasn't completely meaningless. Maybe it would mean I hadn't completely failed." "That's not fair to Catherine. Or to me." "I know. God, Anna, I know. And I'm sorry. I should have told you from the beginning. But I was afraid you'd run if you knew someone was watching. Afraid you'd see it as manipulation instead of opportunity." "It was manipulation. Yes." They stood in silence, the weight of his confession settling between them like dust after an explosion. Finally, Eleanor spoke. "The night Thomas died, you said there was no death certificate, no record. How did you know?" "I didn't. Not for certain. I was bluffing, hoping to force Daniel to admit he was lying about the timeline. But he wasn't lying about Thomas being dead. No, Thomas Hayes is dead. Heart failure in Santa Fe, just like Daniel said. The rest about when it happened and whether you were involved, that was lies built on grief." Eleanor sank back into her chair. "Your sister, Catherine, did she know about me, about Thomas's other women?" "I don't know. She never spoke of it. I found out about his pattern after she died when I started investigating." Caleb's face was anguished. "If I had told her, if I had arrested him sooner, she might still be alive. Or she might have taken the laudanum anyway. Depression isn't always about circumstances, Caleb. Sometimes it's about something broken inside that no amount of saving can fix." The words hung between them, true and terrible. "Is that how you felt, with Thomas broken inside?" Eleanor considered the question. "No. With Thomas I felt buried alive. Suffocating. Like every day I stayed was another day of dying slowly. But I wasn't broken. I was trapped. There's a difference. And when I left, I could breathe again. For the first time in 2 years, I could breathe." Caleb moved closer, his eyes searching her face. "Anna, I know I don't have the right to ask this. Not after what I just told you. But when Marshal Blackwood comes, when this all gets investigated, there's going to be a question. About the night Thomas died. About whether you knew he was ill. Whether you could have helped him. I wasn't there when he died. I know. But Daniel is going to claim you drove him to it. That your leaving caused the heart failure. That you're responsible even if you weren't physically present." Eleanor laughed, a bitter sound. "So I'm guilty of the crime of leaving, of choosing to live instead of slowly dying in a loveless marriage." "That's what he'll argue, that you had a duty as a wife. That abandoning a sick man makes you culpable. Thomas wasn't sick when I left. He was angry and drunk and mean. Whatever happened to him afterward, whatever choices he made, they were his, not mine. I believe you, but you need to be ready for the questions, for the insinuations. Daniel lost his brother. He's not thinking clearly. He needs someone to blame, and you're the easiest target." Eleanor stood again, moving to the window. Outside, darkness had fallen completely. The town was a scatter of lamplight against the vast, empty desert. "I'm tired of being blamed for surviving," she said quietly. "Thomas Hayes hurt people. He hurt your sister. He hurt me. He hurt who knows how many other women. And when he died alone in a boarding house, that was the consequence of his own choices. Not mine, not Catherine's. His." She turned to face Caleb. "I know you wanted to save your sister. I know you see me and think about what might have been. But I'm not Catherine. I'm not a second chance for you to get it right. I'm just a woman who made hard choices and trying to live with them. I know that. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you built this entire town into a stage for your redemption story. and I'm just a player in it, saying the lines you hoped I'd say." The accusation hung in the air. Caleb's face went pale. "That's not what I meant it to be." "Maybe not, but that's what it became." Before Caleb could respond, the door burst open. Lily Cross stood there breathless from running. "Miss Winters, Mr. Morgan, you need to come to the store now." "What's happened?" "It's Mr. Carver. He's calling a meeting. He says he has proof you killed his brother." The general store was packed with people when Eleanor and Caleb arrived. Every bench was full. People stood along the walls. Lamplight threw dancing shadows across faces tense with anticipation. Daniel Carver stood at the center of the room holding papers in his shaking hands. Margaret Cole sat at the council table with William Cross and Reverend Ward. She looked up as Eleanor entered. "Mrs. Hayes, Miss Winters, whatever we're calling you, Mr. Carver has requested an emergency meeting. He claims to have new evidence." Eleanor's stomach dropped. She forced her voice to remain steady. "What kind of evidence?" Daniel turned to face her. His eyes were red, whether from tears or rage, Eleanor could not tell. "Evidence that you knew my brother was ill, that you left him anyway, that you're responsible for his death." He held up the papers. "This is a letter from the landlady in Santa Fe, the woman who found Thomas dead. She says he mentioned a wife, that he was trying to find her, that he died calling for someone named Anna." Silence. "He was alone when he died," Daniel continued, his voice breaking. "Alone and sick and calling for the woman who abandoned him. That's murder even if you weren't holding the pillow over his face." Eleanor felt the weight of every eye in the room. She saw judgment there, uncertainty, fear. "I didn't know he was ill," she said clearly. "When I left Thomas in July he was healthy, angry but healthy. What happened to him after I left is tragic, but it's not my responsibility. You were his wife. I was his prisoner. He lied to me, controlled me, made my life a nightmare for 2 years. When I finally escaped, I did what any trapped animal does. I ran, and I don't regret it. You should. You should regret leaving a sick man to die alone. He wasn't sick when I left. How do you know? Did you ask? Did you care?" Daniel's face was twisted with grief and rage. "Or did you just run away like a coward, leaving him to face death alone?" The room erupted, people shouting over each other, some defending Eleanor, some condemning her. Margaret banged her hand on the table, calling for order. In the chaos, Caleb stepped forward. "Thomas Hayes was not the man you think he was," he said, his voice cutting through the noise. The room quieted. Everyone turned to look at him. "What do you mean?" Daniel asked. "I mean your brother was a con man. He courted women for their money. He lied to them, manipulated them, and discarded them when they had nothing left to give. Anna was not the first woman to leave him. She was just the only one who got away before he destroyed her completely." "That's a lie." "It's not. I have documented evidence from my time as a U.S. Marshal. I investigated Thomas Hayes for fraud and coercion. I have statements from 3 other women he victimized. I have financial records showing his pattern of theft. Your brother was a criminal, Daniel, and if he died alone, it's because he drove everyone away with his cruelty." Daniel's face went white. "No, Thomas wouldn't. He was my brother. He was a man who hurt people," Caleb said more gently now. "I'm sorry. I know that's hard to hear, but it's the truth." Daniel sank into a chair, the papers falling from his hands. "You're lying. You have to be lying." "I'm not." Margaret spoke into the silence. "Mr. Morgan, you said you have evidence at my ranch. Case files from 1882. I can bring them tomorrow." "Do that." Margaret turned to Daniel. "Mr. Carver, I'm sorry for your loss, truly, but these are serious accusations you're making. If you want this community to judge Anna Winters, you need to accept that we'll also judge your brother's actions. Fair is fair." Daniel's head was in his hands. He was crying now, great, shaking sobs. Eleanor felt something unexpected. Not triumph, not vindication, but pity, because she understood grief and she understood how it could twist into blame when the truth was too painful to bear. She moved toward him slowly, ignoring the murmurs around her. She sat in the chair beside him. "Daniel," she said softly, "I'm sorry your brother is dead. I'm sorry he died alone, but I'm not sorry I left him, and I won't apologize for choosing to live." He looked up at her, his face ravaged. "He loved you. He loved the idea of me, of owning me. That's not the same thing. But he was my brother. I knew him. He was good. He was He was complicated, Eleanor said. People are rarely all good or all bad. Your brother could have been kind to you and cruel to me. Both things can be true. Daniel stared at her, struggling with this. Then he said something that changed everything. I lied. The room went silent. What? Margaret leaned forward. I lied. About some of it. Daniel's voice was hollow. Thomas did die in Santa Fe, that's true, and he did die alone. But the landlady's letter, I added things, about him calling for Anna, about him being sick before she left. I wanted it to be her fault. I needed it to be her fault, because if it wasn't, then maybe it was mine. Yours. I knew what he was like, with women. I knew he lied to them. I helped him sometimes vouching for him, making him seem respectable. I thought it was harmless, just Thomas being Thomas. But when he died, when I got the telegram from Santa Fe, I realized I'd been helping him hurt people, and I couldn't live with that. So I made it Anna's fault instead. He turned to Eleanor, his eyes pleading. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. You didn't kill him. You didn't even know he was sick. I needed someone to blame. Eleanor felt tears on her face. She did not wipe them away. I understand. How can you understand I tried to destroy you? Because I've spent 3 months blaming myself for things that weren't my fault. For not being strong enough to leave sooner. For not saving Grace from poverty. For surviving when your sister Catherine didn't. She glanced at Caleb. Guilt is easier than grief sometimes. Blame is easier than acceptance. Daniel covered his face with his hands. His shoulders shook. Reverend Ward stood and moved to Daniel's side, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. The old man's voice was soft but clear. Son, it seems to me that what you need is not revenge. It's forgiveness. And the only person who can give you that is yourself. The meeting dissolved after that. People filed out slowly, subdued by what they had witnessed. Margaret announced that the council would meet the next day to make a final decision about Eleanor's employment and Daniel's accusations. Eleanor found herself outside in the cool night air, trembling with reaction. Caleb appeared beside her. They stood in silence for a long moment. You were right, he said finally, about me using you, about building a stage for my own redemption. I'm sorry. I know you are. When Marshal Blackwood comes, I'll tell him everything. About Catherine, about my investigation, about bringing you here. Whatever consequences come from that, I'll accept them. Eleanor turned to face him. In the moonlight, his face was all plains and shadows. Caleb, I'm not angry at you. I'm angry at the situation, at Thomas Hayes, at a world that makes women choose between survival and propriety, but not at you. You should be. Maybe. But anger takes energy, and I'm so tired. She thought about Lily's words, about sad people doing things that hurt others unintentionally, about the difference between bad intentions and bad choices. You made a mistake, she said. You tried to save someone because you couldn't save your sister. That's human. That's understandable. It's also not fair to me. Both things are true. What do you want from me? Eleanor considered the question. What did she want? Honesty, respect, space to make her own choices, and something else, something she was barely ready to name. Connection, the possibility that two broken people might build something together, not to fix each other, but to simply be less alone. I want you to stop seeing me as Catherine's second chance, she said. If we're going to be anything, friends, partners, whatever this is, I need you to see me, Anna Winters. Not who you wish I was, not who you hope to save, just me. I do see you. Do you? Caleb reached out slowly, giving her time to step back. When she didn't, he took her hand. His palm was warm and calloused against hers. I see a woman who survived something that killed my sister, he said. I see someone strong enough to leave when staying would have destroyed her. I see a teacher who cares about her students even when her own life is falling apart. I see, he paused, I see someone I could love if you'd let me, if you wanted that, not because of Catherine, because of who you are. Eleanor's breath caught. The word love hung in the air between them, fragile and frightening. It's too soon, she whispered. I know. And I'm not ready. I know that too. And I might have to leave. If the council decides I'm too much trouble, or if Marshal Blackwood finds some legal reason to take me back to Denver, Then I'll wait. And if you have to go, I'll help you go. Whatever you need, Anna. Not because I'm trying to save you. Because I care about you." She looked up at him, this complicated man with his own ghosts and guilts, and she felt something shift inside her. Not love, not yet, but the possibility of it, the first stirrings of trust after so long believing it was impossible. "Ask me again," she said. "After Marshal Blackwood comes, after the council decides, after everything is settled, ask me then." "I will." They stood together in the darkness, hands linked, two people carrying weights that had grown slightly lighter for being shared. The next morning, Lily Cross came to the schoolhouse before any other student. She found Eleanor sweeping the floor, the same nervous preparation ritual she performed every morning. "Miss Winters," Eleanor looked up. "Good morning, Lily. I need to tell you something about Mr. Morgan." Eleanor set down the broom. "I know, he told me last night. About his sister, about bringing me here intentionally." "Oh." Lily looked disappointed, as if her discovery had been rendered meaningless. "So you know he was watching for you, that he planned it all. I know he made mistakes, and I know he's trying to do better. Are you angry at him?" "I was. I might be again. But right now, I'm just trying to understand." Lily sat on one of the benches, her young face troubled. "Miss Winters, how do you know when someone really cares about you versus when they're just using you for their own reasons?" The question pierced Eleanor's heart. She sat down beside the girl. "That's a very hard question, Lily, and I'm not sure there's a simple answer. Sometimes people do both. They care about you and they use you, not because they're bad, but because they're human and complicated and carrying their own hurts. But how do you protect yourself? How do you know who to trust?" Eleanor thought about Thomas and his lies, about Caleb and his manipulation born of grief, about her own choices and compromises. "I think," she said slowly, "you trust people who admit when they're wrong, who apologize, who try to do better even when it's hard. Perfect people don't exist, but people who are trying, who are honest about their mistakes, those people might be worth the risk." "Is Mr. Morgan worth the risk?" "I don't know yet, but I'm willing to find out." Lily nodded, absorbing this. Then she said, "My mother trusted my father, and he hurt her for years, but she stayed because she thought love meant accepting whatever he did. When she finally left, she said the bravest thing she ever did was stop believing that suffering was the same as devotion." "Your mother was very wise. I wish she'd been brave sooner, before it killed her." Eleanor put her arm around the girl's shoulders. They sat together in silence, two survivors of different tragedies, finding comfort in shared understanding. When the other students began to arrive, Lily stood and moved to her seat. But before the day's lessons began, she caught Eleanor's eye and mouthed two words, "Thank you." Marshal Henry Blackwood arrived on the afternoon train 2 days later. He was a man in his 50s with iron-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much to be easily fooled. He carried himself with the quiet authority of someone accustomed to command. Caleb met him at the station. The two men shook hands, old colleagues reunited under difficult circumstances. "Caleb, it's been a long time." "Too long, Henry. Thanks for coming. Your telegram was cryptic, something about Anna Winters and new evidence. It's complicated. Let me buy you a drink and I'll explain." They sat in the saloon, which was empty in the afternoon lull. Caleb told Henry everything, about Catherine and Thomas Hayes, about the investigation he had abandoned, about bringing Anna to redemption, about Daniel Carver and his accusations. Henry listened without interrupting, his face giving nothing away. When Caleb finished, Henry was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You manipulated a civilian into coming here so you could feel like you'd saved someone. That's not like you, Caleb." "I know." "And you withheld information about an ongoing investigation. Even after you resigned, you had a duty to pass that information to another marshal." "I know that too." "So the question is, what do you want from me? Absolution, permission, or are you finally ready to face what you did?" Caleb stared into his whiskey. "I want to know if Anna Winters is in any legal trouble, if Daniel Carver has any grounds for his accusations. And I want to know what happens to me if I admit I've been obstructing justice for 5 years." Henry sighed. "Nothing happens to you. You resigned. The case was never formally opened. Thomas Hayes is dead. There's no one to prosecute. As for Anna Winters, from what you've told me, she's guilty of nothing except leaving a bad marriage. That's not a crime, even if Daniel Carver wishes it was. So she's free. Legally. Yes, but that doesn't mean the gossip won't follow her. Doesn't mean Daniel won't keep making her life difficult. And it doesn't mean she'll want to stay here knowing you brought her here for your own reasons. I know. Henry finished his drink and stood. I'll talk to her, and to Daniel Carver. I'll make an official report that clears her of any wrongdoing. That should satisfy the law, if not everyone's conscience. That evening, the town council held their final meeting. The general store was packed again, but this time the atmosphere was different, less angry, more thoughtful. Marshal Blackwood attended his presence, lending official weight to the proceedings. He gave his report clearly and concisely. Anna Winters had broken no laws. Thomas Hayes had died of natural causes in Santa Fe months after Anna left Denver. There was no evidence of foul play, no grounds for prosecution. Daniel Carver sat in the back, his face haggard. He did not object. He did not speak. Margaret Cole addressed the crowd. We have a decision to make. Anna Winters lied about her name when she came here, but she's been honest about everything else. She's a good teacher. The children are learning. So the question is, does her past disqualify her from her present? The debate lasted an hour. Some argued that honesty mattered, that a teacher should be above reproach. Others pointed out that everyone in Redemption had some kind of past they were running from. That was why the town existed. Finally, Margaret called for a vote. All in favor of keeping Anna Winters as our teacher, hands rose. Eleanor counted them, her heart pounding. 7, 8, 9. A clear majority. Opposed, 3 hands, including Daniel Carver's. Motion passes. Anna Winters remains our teacher. Eleanor felt her knees weaken with relief. Lily, sitting near the front, turned and smiled at her eyes bright with tears. But the victory felt hollow when Eleanor looked at Daniel. He sat alone, isolated by his grief and his failed accusations. After the meeting ended, Eleanor approached him. People around them stopped talking, watching. "Daniel," she said quietly, "I'm sorry about your brother. Truly, I know you loved him." He looked up at her, his eyes empty. "I don't know if I did. I don't know if I knew him at all. Then grieve the brother you thought you had. That loss is real even if the person wasn't who you believed. How do you do that? Grieve someone who hurt you." Eleanor thought about Thomas, about the complicated tangle of relief and guilt she felt at his death. You acknowledge both truths, that he caused harm, and that losing him still hurts. You don't have to choose one or the other. Daniel's face crumpled. "I don't know how to do that." "Neither do I, but maybe we both learn." She left him there, hoping he would find his way to whatever peace was possible. Outside, Caleb was waiting. Beside him stood Marshal Blackwood. "Miss Winters," Henry said formally, "I need to ask you some questions for my official report." They walked to the schoolhouse, the 3 of them. Inside, Henry lit a lamp and took out a notebook. "I need you to tell me in your own words about your relationship with Thomas Hayes. Everything from beginning to end." So Eleanor told him. About the coerced marriage, about the 2 years of control and isolation, about leaving, about learning of Thomas's death months later. She spoke clearly, without embellishment, laying out facts as simply as she could. Henry wrote it all down. When she finished, he looked up. "And you had no contact with him after you left Denver in July?" "None." "Did you know he was ill?" "No. I didn't even know where he was." Henry nodded and closed his notebook. "That's what I thought. Miss Winters, you're free to go. Legally, you've done nothing wrong. Morally, you made the choice to save yourself. I won't judge that." "Thank you, Marshal." After Henry left, Eleanor and Caleb sat in the quiet schoolhouse. The lamp threw dancing shadows on the walls. "It's over," Eleanor said. "The investigation, the accusations, all of it. Yes. So why don't I feel relieved?" Caleb looked at her, understanding in his eyes. "Because the hard part isn't the external judgment, it's the internal one. You still have to decide if you forgive yourself. Do you forgive yourself for Catherine? No, but I'm learning to live with it, to carry the weight without letting it crush me." Eleanor thought about that, about the weight of names and choices and all the things that could not be changed. "Caleb, you asked me to ask you again, after everything was settled. So I'm asking, why do you care about me, really?" He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was honest in a way that hurt. At first it was about Catherine, about saving someone the way I couldn't save her. But then I got to know you, saw how you fought for your students, how you faced Daniel with courage even when you were terrified, how you chose honesty even when lying would have been easier. And somewhere in there it stopped being about Catherine and started being about you, about wanting to know you better, about hoping you might want to know me too. Even knowing I'm not the person you thought I was, that I'm not Eleanor Hayes, respectable widow, but Anna Winters' woman who walked away. Especially knowing that, because Anna Winters is stronger and braver and more real than Eleanor Hayes ever was. Eleanor felt something break open in her chest. Not the crack of breaking, but the opening of something long closed. "I'm not ready for love," she said. "Not yet. Maybe not for a long time." "I know. But I'm ready for friendship, for honesty, for someone who sees me and doesn't try to fix me. I can do that." "Can you?" "Because everything you've done so far has been about fixing, about saving, about turning me into Catherine's redemption." "You're right, and I'll try to do better. I'll fail sometimes, but I'll try." Eleanor stood and moved to the window. Outside, the desert stretched away into darkness, vast and empty, and somehow beautiful. "I need to go to Denver," she said suddenly. Caleb stood. "What, why?" "Because Grace is there, my sister. I promised her I'd come back, and I've been hiding here using the investigation as an excuse, but really I've just been afraid. Afraid she wouldn't forgive me for leaving her, afraid I wouldn't have enough money to take care of her, afraid of everything." "The council just voted to keep you. You have a job, a home." "I know, and I'll come back. But first I need to see Grace. Need to explain. Need to ask if she wants to come here to build a life with me. She's 12 years old. She should have a choice." "When will you leave?" "Tomorrow, on the morning train." Caleb absorbed this, then he nodded. "I'll take you to the station." "You don't have to. I know, but I want to." That night Eleanor packed her small bag. The same bag she had arrived with 3 months ago, only now it held different things. Not just survival, but hope. Not just escape, but purpose. She took out the photograph of Grace and looked at it for a long time. Then she wrapped it carefully and placed it on top of her other belongings, no longer hidden at the bottom, but visible, acknowledged, real. Morning came cold and clear. Eleanor walked to the station with Caleb at her side. The town was just beginning to wake. Smoke rose from chimneys. A rooster crowed somewhere. At the station, Lily was waiting. She ran to Eleanor and threw her arms around her. "You're coming back, right? Promise you're coming back." "I promise." 2 weeks? Maybe 3. I have to see my sister. "Bring her with you. She can go to school here. We'll be friends." Eleanor hugged the girl tightly. "I'll try." The train whistle sounded. Eleanor picked up her bag. She turned to Caleb. They looked at each other for a long moment, all the words they had not said hanging between them. Finally, Caleb spoke. "Go find your sister. Bring her home if she'll come. And when you get back, we'll start over. No secrets, no saving. Just 2 people trying to figure out how to be honest with each other. I'd like that." The train whistle sounded again. Eleanor climbed aboard. As the train pulled away, she looked back at the small station at Caleb standing there with Lily beside him, both of them waving. She looked at the town beyond at Redemption, with its rough buildings and rougher people, all of them carrying their own weights, all of them trying to build something from the wreckage of their pasts. And she thought about names, about Eleanor Hayes and Anna Winters, and whoever she would become when she finally stopped running. The train carried her east toward Denver, toward Grace, toward a reckoning with the girl she had left behind and the woman she had become. But for the first time in 3 months, she was not running. She was choosing. And that made all the difference. Denver looked different through the train window, or perhaps Eleanor had changed so much in 3 months that the city itself seemed transformed. The same brick buildings, the same muddy streets, the same mountains rising blue in the distance. But now it all felt smaller, more contained, as if the vast Arizona sky had recalibrated her sense of scale. She stepped off the train into the November cold, her breath pluming white in the afternoon air. The orphanage was across town, a 2-mile walk she had made in her mind 1,000 times, but not in body, since the day she left Grace there 6 months ago. The building was gray stone, institutional, and forbidding. A sign read, "St. Margaret's Home for Children." Eleanor stood outside the iron gate and tried to steady herself. What if Grace refused to see her? What if 6 months of absence had turned love into resentment, but she had not come this far to turn back now? The woman who answered the door was severe, dressed in black with steel gray hair pulled back tight. Sister Mary Catherine, the nameplate on her desk, read when she led Eleanor to a small office. "I'm here to see Grace Winters," Eleanor said. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, too formal, too careful. Sister Mary Catherine consulted a ledger. "Grace Winters, yes." She looked up, eyes sharp. "Are you family?" "I'm her sister, Anna Winters." The nun's eyebrows rose slightly. "We were told Grace had no family, that she was an orphan." Eleanor felt shame heat her face. "Our circumstances were complicated. I had to leave her here temporarily. But I'm back now. I want to take her home." "Home." The word seemed to hang in the air, weighted with judgment. "Miss Winters, there's something you should know. Grace has been placed in a preliminary adoption. The Lewis family filed papers 3 weeks ago. The process is nearly complete." The floor seemed to tilt beneath Eleanor's feet. "What number?" "She's my sister. You can't just give her away." "You abandoned her for 6 months with no contact. The Lewises are a respectable married couple who can provide stability. The court favors such arrangements." "I didn't abandon her. I was working, building a life for us." "Nevertheless," Sister Mary Catherine stood. "Mrs. Lewis is here now, actually. She visits Grace 3 times a week. Perhaps you should speak with her before seeing the child. It might be less disruptive." Eleanor wanted to scream that she would not be managed or redirected, that Grace was her family, not some stranger's, but she forced calm into her voice. "Fine. I'll speak with her, Mrs. Lewis was younger than Eleanor expected, perhaps 30, with kind eyes and expensive clothes. She sat in the visiting room, a basket of sweets beside her. "Miss Winters," she said when Eleanor entered. "Sister Mary Catherine told me you might come. I'm Margaret Lewis." Eleanor remained standing. "You're trying to adopt my sister." "I'm trying to give a child a home, a real home, with 2 parents and security. Can you offer her that?" "I can offer her family, which is more than you can." Mrs. Lewis's expression remained gentle but firm. "Miss Winters, I understand you care for Grace, but caring isn't enough. She needs stability, education, a future. My husband and I can provide all of that." "So can I. I'm a teacher in Arizona Territory. I have a job, a salary, a home prepared for her. A single woman working on the frontier that's hardly stable." Eleanor felt rage building, but kept her voice level. "Grace should choose, not you, not Sister Mary Catherine. Not the courts, Grace. Grace is 12 years old. She's not equipped to make this decision. She's equipped to know who her family is." Mrs. Lewis stood gathering her basket. "I've grown to care for Grace these past weeks. She's bright and sweet and deserves better than uncertainty. I hope you'll consider what's truly best for her, not just what eases your own guilt." After she left, Eleanor sat alone in the visiting room and fought the urge to break something. She had survived Thomas. She had survived Denver. She had built a new life from nothing. And now this stranger wanted to take the one person who mattered most. Sister Mary Catherine returned. "Grace will see you now. But Miss Winters, I must warn you. She's been told you're coming. Her reaction may not be what you hope." The door opened. Grace stood in the hallway, taller than Eleanor remembered, thinner, with eyes that held no warmth. They stared at each other across the small office. Eleanor's voice came out as barely more than a whisper. "Grace? Oh, Grace, I'm so sorry." "Sister Mary Catherine says you want to take me away." Not Anna, not sister, just flat observation that landed like a stone in Eleanor's chest. "Yes, I have a job now, in Arizona, a place we can live together. I came to bring you home. This is my home now." The words were simple, devastating. Eleanor felt her carefully constructed plans crumble. "Grace, I know you're angry. You have every right to be, but I never stopped thinking about you. Everything I did was to make enough money to come back for you. You promised you wouldn't leave me. You promised we'd stay together. Those promises didn't mean much." Eleanor moved closer, but Grace shifted back, maintaining distance. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I hope you'll give me a chance to explain. I don't need explanations. Mrs. Lewis explained everything. You left because you didn't want the responsibility. You chose yourself over me. That's not true. I left because I had no choice, and I came back as soon as I could. 6 months, Anna. 6 months without a letter, without a telegram. I thought you were dead, or worse, that you'd forgotten about me. Guilt crashed over Eleanor like a wave. You're right. I should have written. I should have found a way to let you know I was alive, that I was working toward bringing you home. I was selfish and scared, and I hurt you. Grace's rigid posture softened slightly, though her arms remained crossed. Mrs. Lewis says I'll have my own room, and books, and a piano. She says I can go to a real school and maybe even college someday. I can't give you a piano, but I can give you family. I can give you a sister who will never leave you again. You already left me once. I know. And I'll spend the rest of my life proving that was the biggest mistake I ever made. Grace's face crumpled slightly, the 12-year-old beneath the defensive shell showing through. I don't know if I can trust you again. Eleanor's voice caught. Then don't. Not right away. Come to Arizona for 2 weeks. See where I live, meet the people I work with. If you hate it, if you still want the Lewises, I'll bring you back. I'll let you go. But give me 2 weeks to show you that I mean what I say. Why should I? Because I'm your sister, and because somewhere under all that anger, you still love me, just like I love you. Grace stared at her for a long moment. Then she said quietly, I signed the papers, the preliminary adoption. Mrs. Lewis said it was just a formality, that it would make things easier. I didn't know you were coming back. Eleanor felt ice in her stomach. When? Yesterday. Then we'll unsign them. We'll go to the courts. We'll fight this. Mrs. Lewis says once the papers are signed, it's hard to undo. I don't care how hard it is. You're my family, Grace, and I will fight for you until I have nothing left to fight with. Something shifted in Grace's expression. The wall did not come down, but a crack appeared. 2 weeks, she said finally. I'll ask Sister Mary Catherine about visiting, but if I don't like it, I'm coming back here, and you have to accept that. Deal. The next 3 days were the hardest of Eleanor's life, harder than leaving Thomas, harder than facing Daniel Carver's accusations, because this time she was not fighting external enemies, but the consequences of her own choices. She hired a lawyer to contest the preliminary adoption. She provided proof of employment letters of reference from Margaret Cole and the Redemption Town Council evidence that she could support Grace. Mrs. Lewis fought back, claiming Eleanor's frontier life was unsuitable for a young girl, that a single woman could not provide proper supervision, that Grace deserved the stability of a traditional family. The judge was skeptical of both sides. This girl has been in the orphanage for 6 months with no contact from her sister. Now suddenly, Miss Winters appears and wants custody. Mrs. Lewis's concerns are not unreasonable. Eleanor's lawyer, a young man named Peter Walsh, who took the case for minimal fee, argued passionately. Miss Winters was building a life capable of supporting her sister. She acted responsibly, ensuring she had employment and housing before reclaiming custody. That shows planning, not abandonment. And the lack of contact. Eleanor spoke directly to the judge. I was wrong not to write. I was scared and focused on survival, and I failed Grace. But I'm here now, and I'm asking for a chance to make it right. The judge studied her. Miss Winters, I'm going to allow a trial visit. 2 weeks as you proposed. Grace will go to Arizona with you. At the end of that time, I'll interview her privately. If she wishes to return and proceed with the Lewis adoption, I'll grant it. If she wishes to stay with you, I'll dismiss the adoption petition. Fair. Eleanor's breath released. Fair. Thank you, Your Honor. Mrs. Lewis looked stricken, but nodded her acceptance. That evening, Eleanor sat with Grace in the orphanage common room. The girl was quiet, processing everything. Are you scared? Eleanor asked. Yes. Me too. What if I like it there? What if I want to stay, but I'm still angry at you? Eleanor took Grace's hand carefully. Then we figure it out together. Anger doesn't cancel love, Grace. You can be both. You're allowed to be complicated. Mrs. Lewis isn't complicated. She's just nice. Nice is good, but nice isn't family. Grace was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Tell me about Arizona. Really, not just the good parts. So Eleanor told her. About the heat and the dust and the small house, about students who ranged from 6 to 16, about Lily Cross and her sharp observations, about Caleb Morgan and his complicated history, about a community built from broken people trying to build something better. It's not perfect, Eleanor finished, but it's real, and it's ours if you want it. Grace nodded slowly. 2 weeks. I'll try. The train to Arizona left 3 days later. Eleanor and Grace boarded with a single trunk between them, everything Grace owned in the world. As the train pulled away from Denver, Eleanor watched the city recede. Beside her, Grace pressed her face to the window, silent and uncertain. The first day passed in awkward quiet. They spoke little. Grace read a book Mrs. Lewis had given her. Eleanor pretended to sleep but mostly watched her sister and prayed she would not fail her again. That night, in the cramped sleeping berth, Grace finally spoke. "Anna, what if I'm not brave enough for this? Brave enough for what? Starting over, trusting you, living somewhere new." Eleanor turned to face her in the darkness. "Then I'll be brave enough for both of us until you catch up. Promise, promise." Grace was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I want to believe you, but I'm scared you'll leave again. I know, and I can't prove I won't with words, only with time. So I'll show you day by day that I'm staying." The second night on the train, something shifted. Grace fell asleep with her head on Eleanor's shoulder, her small body relaxing into trust. She was not yet ready to speak aloud. Eleanor sat very still, afraid to move and wake her. Through the window, the desert landscape rolled past in moonlit silver, scrub brush and empty land, and a sky so vast it seemed to hold all the world's possibilities. In the window's reflection, Eleanor could see them both. Two faces similar enough to be sisters, different enough to be their own people. Grace young and uncertain. Eleanor older and scarred, but still trying. Eleanor rested her hand gently on Grace's hair. Her lips moved soundlessly. "I'm sorry. I'm here now. I won't leave you again." The train carried them through the night, through New Mexico territory, through the vast empty spaces where people went to disappear or to be found. And Eleanor watched the miles pass and hoped that when they arrived in Redemption, Grace would see what she saw. Not perfection, but home. When they finally stepped off the train in Redemption, 3 days later, it was late afternoon. The sun hung low in the west, painting everything gold. The platform was not empty. Caleb stood there, hat held loose at his side. Beside him was Lily, bouncing with barely contained excitement. Behind them a small crowd. Margaret Cole, William Cross, Reverend Ward, even some of the students. Lily broke away from the group and ran to Grace. "You must be Grace. I'm Lily. Miss Winters told me about you in her letters. We're going to be best friends." Grace looked overwhelmed but managed a small smile. Eleanor met Caleb's eyes over the girls' heads. Something warm passed between them, unspoken but understood. "Welcome home," he said quietly. "Thank you for meeting us." Margaret stepped forward. "Miss Winters, Grace, we've prepared a house for you. Nothing fancy, but it's got 2 bedrooms, and it's close to the school." Eleanor felt emotion rise in her throat. "You didn't have to do that." "Course we did. You're one of us now." The house was small but solid, whitewashed walls and 2 rooms exactly as Margaret had promised. Furniture had been donated or built. On the table sat a basket of food and a note in Lily's handwriting, "Welcome home. You're going to love it here." After everyone left, Eleanor and Grace stood in their new home in silence. Grace moved through the room, slowly touching everything: the table, the chairs, the small bed in the room that would be hers. In the corner sat a shelf with 3 books and another note from Lily. "This is really ours?" Grace asked, voice small. "Really ours?" "For how long?" "As long as we want it to be." That night they sat on the small porch and watched stars emerge in the vast desert sky. Grace leaned against Eleanor's shoulder. "Anna, I think I might like it here." Eleanor's heart expanded. Yeah, it feels safe, like people actually want us." "They do. And so do I." Grace was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'm still angry at you for leaving, for not writing, for everything. I know. But I'm also glad you came back." "Me too, Grace. Me too." The next week passed in a blur of adjustment. Grace attended school sitting in the front row with wide eyes and careful attention. The other students welcomed her with easy acceptance. Lily appointed herself Grace's guide, showing her everything, making her laugh, drawing her out of her shell. Eleanor taught and watched her sister settle in with growing relief. This was working. Grace was happy. Maybe, just maybe, they would make it through the 2 weeks, and Grace would choose to stay. Then, on the 8th day, everything changed. Eleanor was teaching arithmetic when William Cross burst into the schoolhouse, his face pale. "Anna, you need to come to the store. Now. There's a telegram." Eleanor's stomach dropped. She dismissed the students early and ran. The general store was crowded. Margaret, Caleb, Reverend Ward. Others. They all turned when she entered. Margaret held a piece of paper, her expression grim. "Anna, you need to read this." The telegram was from Marshal Henry Blackwood in Denver. "Stop. Investigation reopened." "Stop. Thomas Hayes, alive." "Stop. Spotted in Tucson." "Stop. Claims Anna Winters still legally his wife." "Stop. Seeking custody of minor child Grace Winters as family." "Stop. Advise caution." "Stop. Blackwood." Eleanor's vision blurred. The paper slipped from her hands. No, that's impossible. He's dead. Daniel said he died in Santa Fe." Caleb picked up the telegram, his jaw tight. Either Daniel lied or Thomas faked his death. Either way, he's alive now. And if he's in Tucson, he's only a day's ride from here. He can't take Grace. He's not her family. He's nothing to her. Margaret's voice was hard. Legally, as your husband, he might have a claim, especially if he argues you're unfit and he can provide a more stable home. Eleanor felt the room spin. She had escaped Thomas once, built a new life, found Grace. And now he was back, reaching out from the grave she thought he was in, trying to take everything again. "What do I do?" Caleb stepped closer. "We fight. Together. This is your home now, Anna, and we protect our own." A town meeting was called for that evening. Every adult in Redemption crowded into the schoolhouse. Grace sat with Lily in the back, frightened and confused. Margaret addressed the crowd. "Some of you know Anna's story, some don't. But here's what matters now. A man claiming to be her husband is threatening to take custody of her sister. The law might be on his side. But justice sure as hell isn't." Murmurs of agreement. The question is, what do we do? Do we hide Anna and Grace? Do we confront this man if he comes here? Do we involve the territorial authorities? I want ideas. Reverend Ward stood. "We cannot act outside the law, no matter how unjust it seems, but we can bear witness. We can document Thomas Hayes's character. We can provide testimony that Anna is fit and capable." William Cross spoke next. "We can also make it damn uncomfortable for him to show his face here. Redemption takes care of its own." Others chimed in. Offers of support, pledges to stand with Eleanor, plans to contact lawyers to gather evidence to build a defense. Eleanor stood, her voice shaking. "Thank you, all of you, but I need to say something. Thomas Hayes is dangerous, not violently, but in other ways. He manipulates, he lies, he makes people doubt themselves. If he comes here, I need you to be ready for that. He'll try to turn you against me. He'll make me seem unstable or unfit. And some of you might believe him." "We won't," Lily called from the back. "We know who you are." Eleanor met the girl's eyes. "I hope you're right." The meeting ended with a plan. Caleb would ride to Tucson the next day with 2 other men to investigate. Marshal Blackwood would be contacted for legal guidance. And Eleanor would prepare for the possibility that Thomas might arrive in Redemption, demanding what he claimed was his. That night, Eleanor could not sleep. She sat on her porch and stared at the darkness and tried to understand how her past kept finding her, no matter how far she ran. Footsteps in the dark. Caleb appeared, his face shadowed. "Can't sleep either?" he asked. "No." He sat beside her. For a long moment, neither spoke. "I should have known," Eleanor finally said. "Should have checked. Should have made sure he was really dead before I let myself believe I was free." "You can't blame yourself for believing what you were told." "Can't I? I wanted him dead so badly that I didn't question it when Daniel said it was true. And now Grace might pay the price for my wishful thinking." Caleb's hand found hers in the darkness. "Whatever happens, we'll face it. You're not alone this time, Anna. What if he takes her? What if the law says she belongs with him as my husband's family? Then we'll fight that too. We'll appeal. We'll make so much noise that every judge in the territory knows Thomas Hayes's real character." Eleanor leaned against his shoulder. "I'm tired of fighting, Caleb. I just want peace. I just want to keep my sister safe." "I know, but sometimes peace has to be won." They sat together until dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, two people carrying weights that had grown lighter for being shared but no less real. Caleb left for Tucson at first light, with two ranchers, both armed and grim-faced. Eleanor taught school as if everything was normal, though her hand shook when she wrote on the board, and Grace watched her with worried eyes. 2 days later, Caleb returned. The whole town gathered to hear what he had found. "Thomas Hayes is alive," Caleb confirmed. "He's staying at a boarding house in Tucson under his own name. I spoke with the landlady. He's been there 2 weeks asking questions about redemption, about Anna, about Grace." "Did you confront him?" Margaret asked. "No, I wanted to see what we're dealing with first. He looks the same, sounds the same, but something's wrong with him. The landlady said he has episodes, chest pain, shortness of breath. She thinks his heart is failing." Eleanor absorbed this. Thomas was dying, truly dying, this time not faked. "How long?" she asked. "Months, maybe, not long. And he wants Grace because he's dying alone and desperate, because taking her would hurt you, because controlling something, anything, makes him feel powerful again." Caleb's expression was hard. "He's not doing this for Grace's welfare. He's doing it for himself. One last act of cruelty." The next day, Thomas Hayes arrived in Redemption. He came on the afternoon stage dressed in a fine suit that hung loose on his thinning frame. Eleanor was teaching when someone ran to the schoolhouse with the news. She dismissed class early. Grace clung to her hand. "Is that him? The man you were married to?" "Yes." "I don't want to meet him." "You don't have to. Stay with Lily. I'll handle this." But Grace shook her head. "No, if he's trying to take me, I should see who he is. I should be able to tell the judge what I think." Eleanor's heart broke with pride. 12 years old and already braver than Eleanor had been at twice that age. They walked together to the general store where the town had gathered. Thomas stood in the center, playing the role of wronged husband with practiced ease. "All I want," he was saying to Margaret Cole, "is to take my wife home, and to ensure her sister is properly cared for. Surely you can understand that." "I understand a lot of things," Margaret said coldly. "Starting with the fact that Anna left you for good reason. A misunderstanding, marital difficulties that can be resolved. She doesn't want to resolve them. She wants you to leave. Unfortunately, what she wants is irrelevant. She's my wife, legally bound to me." The door opened. Eleanor and Grace entered. Thomas turned, and for a moment his practiced composure slipped. Eleanor saw what Caleb had described: illness, desperation, and beneath it all the same cold need for control that had defined their marriage. "Anna," he said, voice smooth. "There you are. We need to talk." "We have nothing to talk about, Thomas. Don't we? I think the matter of our marriage and your sister's welfare requires discussion." Grace pressed closer to Eleanor. Thomas's eyes moved to her, calculating. "And this must be Grace. You've grown, my dear. I'm Thomas Hayes, your sister's husband." "She's not your sister," Grace said, voice small but steady. "She's mine. And she doesn't want you here." Thomas smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. "Children often don't understand adult situations. That's why adults make decisions for them." Caleb stepped forward. "You need to leave. Now." "Or what? You'll shoot an unarmed man in front of witnesses? I think not. I have legal rights here. I'm taking my wife back to Denver, and I'm petitioning for custody of Grace. The court will see that a married couple can provide better than a single woman working in the middle of nowhere." "I'd rather die than go back to you," Eleanor said clearly. "Dramatic as always, but you'll come. Because if you don't, I'll make sure Grace ends up in an orphanage where you'll never find her. I have connections, Anna. I can make her disappear." The threat hung in the air, ugly and real. Caleb's hand moved toward his hip where a gun would have been when he was a marshal. Thomas saw it and laughed. "Go ahead, shoot me. I'm dying anyway. Heart failure, the doctor says. 6 months if I'm lucky. But I'll spend those 6 months making sure you lose everything, Anna, just like you made me lose everything when you left." Eleanor felt ice in her veins. He was dying, and he wanted to take her down with him. Before anyone could respond, the door burst open again. Daniel Carver stood there, breathing hard from running. He looked at Thomas and his face went white. "You're alive," Daniel whispered. "The telegram from Santa Fe, the death certificate, you faked it all." Thomas's expression flickered with something like guilt before smoothing into indifference. "Hello, little brother. Come to watch me reclaim what's mine. You told me you were dying. You said you wanted me to know before the end. I sent money. I mourned you. I needed capital. You were always so sentimental." Daniel moved forward, hands shaking. "You used me. Again. Just like always. You made it easy." The brothers faced each other, years of complicated history between them. Then Daniel turned to Eleanor. "I'm sorry. I should have verified. Should have known he'd do something like this. He always does." "It's not your fault," Eleanor said. "Isn't it I helped him hurt people for years, even when I knew what he was? I just wanted to believe he could change." Thomas laughed, a harsh sound. "How touching. But this doesn't change anything. I'm still Anna's husband. I still have legal standing, and I'm still taking what's mine." His face flushed red. He swayed slightly. "Thomas," Daniel stepped toward him. "Are you all right?" "Fine. Just tired. It's been a long day." But he wasn't fine. Eleanor could see it. The sweat on his brow, the hand clutching his chest, the labored breathing. "You need a doctor," she said, not because she cared about him, but because having him die right here would complicate everything. "I need my wife to remember her place." His voice was weaker now. He took a step toward Eleanor and stumbled. Caleb caught him before he fell. "Someone get the doctor," Caleb called. But it was too late. Thomas's eyes rolled back. His body went rigid, then limp. Daniel knelt beside his brother, feeling for a pulse. His face, when he looked up, was stricken. "He's gone, his heart." Silence fell over the room. Eleanor stared at the man who had controlled her life for 2 years now, lying dead on the floor of a general store 1,000 miles from where he'd started. She felt nothing. No relief, no grief, just emptiness. Grace's voice broke the quiet. "Is he really dead this time?" "Yes," the doctor said, arriving too late to help. "Heart failure. I'd say he'd been living on borrowed time for months." Eleanor looked at Daniel, who was crying silently over his brother's body, and she felt for the first time true pity for him, because Daniel had loved Thomas despite everything, and that love had been weaponized against him over and over. She knelt beside Daniel. "I'm sorry." He looked at her with red eyes. "Why, you're free now." "Because you lost your brother, even if he was a terrible person that still hurts." Daniel wiped his face. "I don't know if I'm crying because he's dead or because I'm relieved. What does that make me? Human." 2 days later, they buried Thomas Hayes in Redemption's small cemetery. Only a handful attended. Eleanor because it felt necessary. Daniel because despite everything, Thomas was family. Caleb and Margaret as witnesses. Reverend Ward, who spoke brief words about mercy and judgment and the mysteries of the human heart. Grace did not attend. She stayed with Lily and said she did not mourn people who tried to hurt her sister. Eleanor stood at the graveside and tried to find words for what she felt. This man had shaped her life through cruelty, had driven her to become Eleanor Hayes, had set in motion everything that led her to redemption. "I don't forgive you," she said quietly when the others had left, and it was just her and the fresh grave. "But I'm letting you go. Whatever debt I thought I owed, it's paid now. You're just a man I used to know, nothing more." She walked away and did not look back. That evening, Daniel came to her small house. He carried a leather folder and looked exhausted. "I need to give you something," he said, "before I leave for California." Eleanor invited him in. Grace watched from her bedroom door, wary but curious. Daniel opened the folder. Inside were legal documents and a bank draft. "Thomas had a trust fund from our parents. I thought it was gone, used up in his schemes, but I found the paperwork in his things. It's still there. $40,000. Eleanor stared at the number. It was more money than she had ever imagined. "I don't want his money." "It's not his, not really. It was our parents' money meant for both of us. Thomas stole my half years ago, but his half still exists, and as his widow, it goes to you." "Daniel, I can't." "You can, and you will. Because Grace deserves it. Use it for her education. Use it to build a better school here. Use it however you want. But take it." It's the one good thing that came from our family, and I want it to do some good." He placed the papers on her table. "There's something else. A full confession from me about Thomas's crimes, names of women he hurt, evidence of fraud. I'm giving it to Marshal Blackwood. It won't bring anyone justice now that Thomas is dead, but it might give them closure. Might let them know they weren't alone or crazy." Eleanor looked at this man who had hunted her with such rage months ago and saw someone genuinely trying to atone. "Thank you, Daniel, for all of it. Will you ever forgive me for what I did in trying to blame you? I already have. We were both his victims in different ways, and we're both trying to heal." After Daniel left, Eleanor sat with Grace and showed her the papers. "This is enough money to pay for your education, all the way through medical school if you want, college, whatever you choose." Grace stared at the numbers. "Because he died. Because he finally did one thing right, even if it was by accident. I don't want his money. Neither do I. But we'll take it anyway. Because you deserve every opportunity in the world, and this makes it possible. We'll use it, but we won't let it define us. It's just a tool, nothing more." Grace absorbed this. Then she said, "Can I stay here in redemption? Even with this money, even if I could go somewhere fancy? Is that what you want? Yes, this feels like home. You feel like home. I don't want fancy. I just want us." Eleanor pulled her sister close. "Then we'll stay and build a life here, together." 2 weeks after Thomas's death, Grace's trial period officially ended. The judge in Denver requested a statement from Grace about where she wanted to live. Margaret Cole sat with Grace and Eleanor in the schoolhouse and read the questions carefully. "Grace Winters, do you wish to proceed with the Lewis adoption or return to the custody of your sister, Anna Winters?" Grace's answer was clear. "I want to stay with my sister." "Do you feel safe and cared for in redemption?" "Yes, more than anywhere I've been." "Do you understand that staying with Anna means fewer material comforts than the Lewises could provide?" "I understand. I don't care." Family is more important than things. The judge's ruling came by telegram 3 days later. Adoption petition dismissed. Full custody granted to Anna Winters. Case closed. Eleanor and Grace read it together and cried with relief. But their challenges were not over. 2 months into the new year, as winter gripped the desert with unusual cold, Grace fell ill. It started as a mild fever. Within days, she was burning up, covered in a rash, delirious with pain. The doctor's diagnosis was grave. Scarlet fever. It's serious. She needs constant care, cool compresses, fluids, and prayer. Eleanor did not leave Grace's side. She bathed her sister's burning skin. She forced water past cracked lips. She held Grace when the fever made her cry out in fear and confusion. The community rallied. Lily brought soup her father made. Margaret sent blankets. Reverend Ward came to pray. Caleb sat with Eleanor through the long nights when Grace was at her worst, his presence a steady anchor. On the 5th day, Grace's fever broke. She woke weak and confused, but alive. The first thing she saw was Eleanor's face, exhausted and tear-stained, but smiling. "You stayed," Grace whispered. "Of course I stayed. I promised, remember, I thought I was dying. You scared me. But you're too stubborn to die." Grace managed a weak smile. "I learned from the best." As she recovered over the following weeks, something shifted between them. The last vestiges of Grace's mistrust melted away. She had been sick and vulnerable, and Eleanor had stayed. That was the proof words could never provide. When Grace was strong enough to return to school, Lily organized a welcome-back celebration. The students made cards. Someone baked a cake. It was simple and sweet and exactly right. That evening, Eleanor and Caleb walked by the creek where they had talked so many times before. Spring was beginning to touch the desert, bringing green to the scrub brush and wildflowers to the hillsides. They sat on a flat rock by the creek, not speaking. The water moved over smooth stones, eternal and indifferent. Spring had touched the hillsides with wildflowers purple and gold against the brown earth. Caleb's hand rested near hers on the sun-warmed stone, not touching, just close. Eleanor looked at the desert spreading away in all directions, vast and unforgiving and somehow beautiful. She thought about the woman who had arrived here 7 months ago, terrified and hiding, about Eleanor Hayes, who had never really existed, about Anna Winters, who had finally stopped running. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of all the things they'd survived to reach this moment. Catherine's ghost, Thomas's cruelty, the weight of names and choices, and the terrible courage it took to be seen. From somewhere distant came the cry of a hawk riding thermals she couldn't see. Anna turned to look at Caleb. He was watching the water, his profile calm, patient. A man who had learned to wait, who had learned that saving someone meant giving them space to save themselves. In that moment, sitting beside him in the desert quiet, Anna understood something she hadn't been able to name before. Redemption wasn't a place on a map. It wasn't even a choice you made once and were done with. It was a person who saw all of you, the broken parts, the shameful parts, the parts still healing, and chose to stay anyway. Not to fix you, just to be there while you fixed yourself. Caleb turned and met her eyes. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. Finally, Caleb broke the silence. "I have something to ask you." Eleanor's heart quickened. "All right. I love you, Anna. Not because you're a second chance or because you remind me of Catherine or any of the complicated reasons I thought I did months ago. I love you because you're brave and honest and you fight for what matters. Because you make me want to be better. Because when I think about the future, I want you in it." He turned to face her fully. "Will you marry me? Not right away if you're not ready, but someday, when you are." Eleanor looked at this man who had brought her to redemption for the wrong reasons, but had stayed for the right ones, who had seen her at her worst and her best and chosen to stay anyway. "I love you too," she said. "And yes, someday soon, I'd like to marry you." They kissed, then soft and sure, a promise exchanged beside moving water under the vast Arizona sky. The wedding happened 3 months later in the spring of 1885. Simple and small, in the schoolhouse Eleanor had helped build. Grace stood beside her as witness. Lily stood with Caleb. The whole town attended. Eleanor wore a simple blue dress. Caleb wore his Sunday best. Reverend Ward spoke about second chances and chosen families and the courage it takes to build something new from broken pieces. When they exchanged vows, Eleanor spoke from her heart. "I promise to be honest with you, to let you see all of me, even the parts I'm still learning to accept. I promise to choose you every day the way you've chosen me. I promise that whatever comes, we'll face it together." Caleb's vows were equally simple. "I promise to see you as you are, not who I think you should be. I promise to stand beside you, not in front of you or behind you. I promise to build a life with you, not for you." They sealed their promises with a kiss, and the town erupted in cheers. At the reception, Daniel Carver appeared unexpectedly. He had traveled from California to deliver a wedding gift, the deed to 10 acres of land adjacent to the school purchased with the last of Thomas's trust. "For expansion," he explained, "so you can build a bigger school, help more children." Eleanor hugged him. "Thank you for everything. I'm the one who should be thanking you, for showing me that it's never too late to choose differently." Time moved forward. Grace thrived, becoming one of the school's brightest students. Lily married and became head teacher for the younger children. The school expanded onto Daniel's donated land, doubling in size. And Eleanor, now Anna Winters Morgan, built a life that was messy and complicated and absolutely hers. 4 years later, in the autumn of 1889, Anna sat at the desk in the schoolhouse and wrote a letter to Grace, who was leaving the next day for medical college in San Francisco. "My dearest Grace," she began. "I'm writing this not because I don't know how to say goodbye in person, but because some things need to be written down to be real. When I left you in that orphanage 6 years ago, I thought I was protecting you by building a life before bringing you into it. I was wrong. I should have brought you with me, should have built that life together from the start, but I can't change the past. I can only try to do better in the present. You have given me more grace than I deserved. You trusted me when you had every reason not to. You forgave me when forgiveness was the hardest thing to give. You chose me over comfort and security. And in doing so, you taught me what family really means. It's not about blood or obligation. It's about choosing each other day after day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. I'm so proud of who you've become, a scholar, a healer in training, a young woman with courage and conviction and kindness. The world needs more people like you. Go to San Francisco. Learn everything they can teach you. Save lives and change the world. But know that you will always have a home here. With me, with Caleb, with Lily and Margaret, and all the people who have watched you grow and cheered for your success. Redemption isn't just a place on a map. It's what we carry inside us. The belief that we can be more than our worst moments. The faith that tomorrow can be better than yesterday. The courage to keep trying even when we fail. You are my redemption grace. The living proof that love is stronger than mistakes. That families can be built, not just born into. That second chances are real. I love you more than words can say. Your sister always, Anna Winters Morgan. She sealed the letter and placed it in Grace's trunk with the clothes and books and medical supplies they had packed together. That evening, the whole town gathered to see Grace off. There were tears and laughter and promises to write. Grace hugged everyone, saving Anna for last. "I'll make you proud," Grace whispered. "You already have. Every single day." As the stagecoach carried Grace toward her future, Anna stood with Caleb's arm around her waist and watched until the dust settled. "She'll be fine," Caleb said. "I know, but I'll worry anyway." That's what family does. Anna looked at the town spread out before them, the school bearing her name, the small houses where families lived and struggled and survived, the church and the store and the dusty streets where children played. This was what she had built from the ashes of Eleanor Hayes. Not a perfect life, not a life without pain or loss or hard choices, but a real life, an honest life, a life that belonged entirely to her. She thought about names, about Anna Winters, who had been broken and rebuilt, about Eleanor Hayes, who had been a necessary fiction, about Anna Winters Morgan, who was the synthesis of both the woman who had survived and chosen love anyway. "Caleb," she said. "Yes. Do you ever regret it? Bringing me here, all the complications I brought with me." He was quiet for a moment, considering. Then he smiled. "Not for a single second. You're the best complication that ever happened to me." They walked home together as the sun set over redemption, painting the desert in shades of amber and gold. And Anna Winters Morgan, teacher, sister, wife, survivor, felt something she had not felt in years. Not just peace, but joy. The deep, abiding joy of being fully, completely, honestly herself. And knowing that was enough. No, more than enough. It was everything. The end.